We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And boy, we're getting close to the end of the year. We're gonna have a podcast of the week of Christmas? Is that the plan? I don't know. Christmas falls on a Friday, so we have potentially time.
Dude, who cares? I mean, it's COVID.
Yeah.
I don't know what day. Somebody said, "Are we doing something next week?" And I was like, "Why wouldn't we?" They're like, "It's Christmas Eve on Thursday, 'cause
right?
That's when my kids climb." I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'll be here. Where am I going to go?" It's not like I'm going out of town.
I mean, we're normally recording on Tuesday. Tuesday is in advance. We can have things prepped and ready to
we'll
post.
See.
So.
I will not guarantee
right.
because I haven't talked to my wife about it. You know, but I will. I don't see any reason why we couldn't.
Okay.
I'll put it to you that way.
All right.
So it'll just be a matter, and I don't know. We'll see.
All right, folks. So this might be the last podcast episode of 2020, or it might not be.
It probably won't be. Let's be honest. Come on, you know us.
It wouldn't. I mean, my plan would be to do something, but hey, we'll play it by ear. You've been softly warned that there might not be more episodes this year. Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Yeah, and then there's New Year's the week after that, and the kids are going to be home starting next week. So that's the only thing that slows me down is the fact that the kids are home. But the kids are always home. Yeah. So what difference does it make to them? The only thing I would do is I would make sure, because we've got a gaming computer out there that they can play, and that will be local and not online stream. So that will slow them down a little bit. And then maybe if just one person is streaming Netflix that they can both watch together, they'll do that. That'll slow down, because right now I've got 1, 2, 3, and my wife is leaving, so only 3 people currently co-streaming with me to do this podcast. Thank goodness for my store-bought router and not using the crappy Spectrum or whatever they're called these days.
Fixing your double NAT beforehand. Yeah.
That's right. So before we get into the podcast, I want to ask a question of all of our listeners. Right. Many of you send in questions with pictures about things. So, on AV Gadgets, where I'm now the editor-in-chief, please go check it out, avgadgets.com. I am often looking for pictures to post with my articles. So, are you a fledgling photographer? Do you think you have a nice setup? Do you have a nice speaker that you wish would be the top of an article on AV Gadgets? Send it to me or when you send in the pictures to Rob, you just have to send in this, basically a note that says, "I give you permission to use this indefinitely forever for purposes of, AV Gadgets," or "I give Tom Andrew permission to use this," or something like that. I don't know. Just tell me I can use it, because I don't want to get sued. I don't want you to come back later and say, "Oh my God, that article's got 17 million views. I want, whatever," and I'm gonna be like, "No, I'm not doing that. I'll change the picture." So yes, send in some pictures if you like. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I'm not gonna. We'll still answer your questions. It won't make any difference on that.
It doesn't affect the podcast.
But it would be nice. No. It would just be nice to have some real pictures instead of the stock photography and ripping things from somebody's website. A lot of times what I'll do is, if I'm talking about a speaker, I'll go to SVS's website and put a generic picture of a sub. I'd rather have a real picture of a real sub in somebody's real home. Would you like that to be your sub? Take a picture of it. Send it to me. Make sure you tell me what the heck it is too, just in case it's got it's a little blurry or something. So, all right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to avrant.com, leave us a comment, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can contact us directly, Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. And my wife is interrupting. Everybody say hi to my wife as we're recording the podcast. I knew you were leaving. I already told them that you're gone, so goodbye. Love you. Don't open that door. It's my door. Door's closed. You're supposed to open it. Everybody knows
if
that.
everybody like rushes over to YouTube to try and see anything, no, it was still just Tom's face. We never actually.
It's still just me. She's off to the corner.
Camera angle
there.
didn't change. Door is, where Tom is facing, not behind Tom. So
Yes,
you'll be disappointed if you want to see Tom's.
So
wife.
you should rush over to YouTube anyways.
Yeah, why not?
Just do that. All right, we want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link on the right side of the page. There, it will send you to a PayPal donation site. So we want to thank Brandon, Chris, and Brendan.
What was the first name you said?
Brian.
That's not
Chris,
what I
and
heard.
Brendan.
I don't know if that's what
What
you
did I
said.
say?
I don't know. It sounded
I think I might have mushed together
it sounded
Brian
like
and Brendan.
Bryden or something. I think you mixed the Brendan and the Brian in anticipation.
That sounds like me.
Whatever it was, there were three names: Brian, Chris, and Brendan. There we go. Those are our three PayPal donors this week, and we thank you very much. We appreciate it. It's very nice.
We also want to thank our 126 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service where you sign up for a subscribing member of our podcast, of our community here, where every month a little bit of money goes to Patreon, and the rest of it comes to us. So minimum of $1 a month, which is, $12 a year. It's pretty good.
Pretty good deal.
Get unlimited questions answered, it seems like, on this podcast. If DJ has anything to say about it, he'd still be writing questions in here.
He still can. There's no reason why he can't.
He can. I'm going to start deleting them. It means he's not the boss of me.
Because you're the one managing all the questions. Yeah, well.
Let me exert my imaginary power. Ooh.
Indeed. Well, patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go if you'd like to sign up to make a automatic monthly donation, a voluntary subscription if you want to think of it that way, $1 minimum. And thanks very much to our 126 patrons over there. Thank you.
And I want you all to know that for the most part, I try to only give hard times to the listeners. I know they can take it. A couple of people get bent out of shape when I do that, and I'm just going to let you know that like all the shade I throw Lee is only because I know Lee will take it in the spirit in which it's offered.
It's how Tom shows affection, people.
That's right. That's why I'm not getting Father of the Year this year again. So close. My every response from my children is like, "What, Dad? What? I didn't do anything. What?" I'm like, "Hey, I'm just talking over here." Like, "Yeah, sure you are, jerk. Get away." Sorry, bad dad. We want to thank some people for sending in notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, which is great. Or I guess keeping the podcast going sounds weird now. We should just say for continuing.
That's what it was, because we warned early on. Hey, if either of us gets stricken with the COVID, then that might be the podcast on hiatus for a little while. So ever since making that announcement, people have been like, "Hey, thanks for still being here week after week." That's more or less what it is.
Thanks for not getting sick.
That's right.
Trying real hard. Believe me, the reason I'm not getting sick has nothing to do with my kids or my children or my wife or me. It's only because of the podcast. That's the only reason I wear a mask. I should have an AVRant mask, then nobody would know what it was. So we want to thank Jack, Nick, Chris, who's a new loyal listener after hearing about us from the HT guys, and Joe for their notes of gratitude. So thank you, Jack, Nick, Chris, and Joe.
Indeed. I'll repeat the names: Jack, Nick, Chris, and Joe. Thank you very much for the notes of gratitude and encouragement. I will admit, I kind of phoned in putting together the topic list this week, so I very well might have missed some names. I just took the ones that are in email. I kind of didn't pay much attention to Twitter or Facebook this week, so there you go. If people thanked us elsewhere, or even an email and I missed you, not intentional, we really do appreciate it. Still going to answer all the questions that come in, so thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
And I know this will probably come up during these questions today, but I will say that if you haven't bought your big electronic gift for Christmas yet, it is too late. Everything
Especially by the time
is out
you're
of stock.
hearing this podcast.
By the time you're hearing this, for sure. But even the week before you heard this, it was too late. Like the Oculus Quest 2 sold out.
I mean, that was
completely.
in stock for a long time. I was kind of surprised. I expected it to sell out sooner, but it was around.
But it is gone. There's all sorts of electronic things that people are like, "Oh, can't get this anymore, can't get that anymore." Everything's back ordered until January or February. So, now is the time to be ordering socks for your kids, which is exactly what we are doing right now. We already ordered our big gifts, which I will talk about later because I'm too afraid the kids will hear it through the door. So we will talk about that after Christmas when they open them, and I will give a review of those as well. Ooh, foreshadowing. And then, for right now, it's just like socks and shorts and garbage. So, all right, some news here. People wrote us about it, so I guess we have to address it. Audioholics, Forbes, and a few other outlets posted articles with Sound United's claim that their HDMI 2.1 receivers work with 4K 120 signals. At least from the PS5 and NVIDIA RTX 30 series GPUs. But is this really a fix, as the headlines would have you believe? First up, the Xbox Series X still cannot send through 4K 120 through AV receivers. So clearly, no, this is not a complete fix. Secondly, the 4K 120 from NVIDIA graphics cards made it through the receivers, but not with VRR, variable refresh rate. So there's still issues there. The PS5 works, but it's supposed to be getting VRR via a future firmware update. Will that work when it arrives? And then no mention of all the ATI's new 6000 series GPUs. So, yeah, I did write an article over at AV Gadgets basically saying the same thing we've said on this podcast for a year, which is this is a terrible year to buy a receiver, and this is one of the reasons I gave, of course. But just the lack of number of inputs alone is enough reason not to buy a receiver this year. But then to have them not work on top of it, it's just like icing on the cake, icing on the cake.
They keep trying to put lipstick on this pig, trying to gold coat this turd. It's not the way that we would recommend buying an AV receiver this year for this particular feature. It is the perfect time to wait. I don't even know if anything changed. Like I think they just tested it all along. The testing, even from that original German website that broke the story months ago. The PS5 always seemed to work. That never really seemed to be a problem. So to come back out now and have headlines like, what do they even say? No issues.
Well, they're basically saying it's fixed.
Yeah, some say fixed, some say no issues, and I'm like, but what a.
But it still does. I mean, if you read the body of the article, and I'm so sick of this. It's like the articles have to be article titles have to be inflammatory.
Right.
Almost.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you have to either grab people by a shocking headline or one that makes them mad. So those are the two options that you have. So this is a shocking headline in that, hey, this thing was broken and now it's totally fixed. And then you read it and you're like, no, it's not. Even in your article, it says it's not fixed. It doesn't work with the Xbox. How is that fixed?
And variable refresh rate doesn't work with the NVIDIA graphics cards, which is kind of a big deal for PC gamers. So
I just don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was it. People sent in the news because they saw the Audioholics headline and they saw the Forbes headline and other headlines, and it's that's the situation.
I scanned it. I scanned that article and went, wait a second, it's not fixed. So I was going to go back and fix my article and say, okay, well this issue has apparently been fixed now, and I went, oh, it hasn't. Yeah. So I didn't change anything. All right, Samsung announced a non-modular 110-inch 4K HDR, it's 2000 nits full screen micro LED display for the consumer market. Price was not officially announced, but pre-orders will start in South Korea this year, and retailers there are anticipating a price tag equivalent to $90,000 US dollars, whatever. Samsung did claim it would cost less than six figures, so I would anticipate a $99,999.
Very possible.
And 99 cents.
Because if you're the type of person willing to pay $90,000, I bet you're willing to pay $99,000. That's not going to be the amount that breaks you.
Yeah, and AVRant listener Nick wonders why this doesn't use the modular approach. He literally would have to take down walls to move a 110-inch display into his basement, while people who are spending $90,000 on a display have no problems cutting a huge slit in the wall and just sliding a massive TV in through their entire house, Or more likely, it's just getting dropped into, bars and restaurants and stadiums and stuff like that, where they do have these huge doors, or brand new construction. Those would be the places I would expect this to go. I expect them to sell in the tens.
I don't know. There's a lot of well-heeled people out there. It's kind of
maybe hundreds of these. Yeah, but come on, you're not you're not buying 100.
I'm not entirely sure why this isn't using the modular the wall design, which was something that some people had already purchased. I mean, of course, it's been brought up. When you do the wall design, it has to be professionally installed. Each individual module has to be calibrated to all the others so that your colors don't change visibly from module to module.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess having it all on a single back plane with a single processor controlling the scaling and all of that is slightly simpler. Maybe that helps bring the cost under six figures. Might have something to do with it.
It doesn't seem like you would need as much calibration, which means you could just buy it and put it on the wall. I mean, not put it on the wall.
That easy.
It is a wall. All right. Disney announced a gazillion new shows for Disney Plus. It is unreal how many shows they announced. And I am a little concerned about how interconnected all these things are, what they're planning on doing, because we saw them start to kind of want to do this with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then there was sort of the idea that the Defenders might
the Netflix
end up.
Marvel shows, which are like verboten now to even mention over at Disney.
They are excommunicated.
Pretty much.
So I'm a little concerned about all the stuff that's going on over there. I am less concerned about the Star Wars stuff that they announced, because while they are talking about a little bit of interconnectivity, it's far enough in the future where if things go askew, they have time to fix it. But now it's like WandaVision is already, it's coming out in a couple of weeks, really. And that's already promised to have characters that are going to show up in later stuff. So we will see. Anyways. They also announced a price increase of $1 more per month that will start March 26, 2021. Everybody anticipated this in the USA. But outside the USA, there is bigger news. Rather than introducing Hulu as a separate streaming service, countries outside the USA will have a star added to Disney+. So it's going to be Disney Plus asterisk?
No, like the actual word star.
Star. Oh, Disney Plus star?
Yeah, ST and then a star in the place of the A. R. So you know how you've got Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, National Geographic across the top right now? There will be another one, Star. Outside of the USA. You won't see Star in the USA. Outside of the USA, you will see Star added.
Okay, I was a little confused by what this thing meant. Okay. So this is not Stars like the...
No, that still exists. There is still another channel called Stars with a Z. No, this is just Star.
It really feels like there's a suit waiting to happen, and Disney's like, come at us, bro. We got so much money. We just got all the money. Everybody else is losing money, but not us. So Star will be the home for Hulu Originals, FX content, and all content with a rating higher than PG-13. Parents will have the option to lock access to the Star section with a passcode, but there is no option to opt out of Star. This is going to be really hard to report on with all these stupid words that are just like normal words. Like you should have come up with something else. It will just be another banner at the top of the Disney Plus starting February 23rd, 2021, and the price is going up $3 per month. Dolby Vision Atmos will be available. There are still no tiers. So they will be getting Hulu for an extra $3 a month, and we have to pay however much we have to pay for Hulu.
That's right.
Separately.
Yeah.
Which is like $7 or $8, $9.
So outside the USA, we're still not getting ESPN Plus. So the bundle of Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, that will still be available in the United States. The price for all of that is only going up by $1 more than what it is right now per month. But outside of the United States, we're not going to get Hulu, we're not going to get ESPN Plus, but they're just going to add this Star thing to Disney Plus, whether you want it or not. It's just going to get added,
right.
And the price is going to go up the equivalent of $3 per month everywhere that exists. So yeah, that is the new deal with Disney Plus. February and March, those changes are coming.
Okay. All right, so no details yet about people who paid for 3 years of Disney Plus in advance, or people who pay for 1 year of Disney Plus just before the price increases take effect, which would be me. Will there be a surcharge? Will they be grandfathered in? If they're not grandfathered in, I would be absolutely shocked.
The 3-year one, I'm pretty sure they even advertised that they would not subject you to a price increase for those 3 years when they did that.
But I just got charged again. I feel like I just got charged again for Disney Plus like recently.
Well, possibly because it launched in November last year. So if it's 1 year in, then it might have just happened.
Yeah, because I started right away. All right, at the beginning. So yeah. All right, and they did not share details about what will happen to Hulu and FX content that is already streaming on other providers outside the U.S. Okay, I'm sure something will happen, but who cares?
I think they'll probably just wait for the contracts to expire, and then it'll come on over to Star.
So Harmony remotes are sold out at most retailers, and some folks on forums and Reddit are reporting that back orders have been canceled as they've been told no further shipments will be coming. So is Harmony dead? For what it's worth, Logitech's current CEO did say the Harmony division is tiny and has shrinking relevance, and that how long it will be out there, I don't know, back in 2019. But he did promise that they'll always take care of Harmony users because of how passionate the small user base is. So it's possible existing hardware and servers will continue to function for some time. Yeah, but, don't bet on it.
Yes. You got to translate business speak from a company CEO like the CEO of Logitech. The word always to most business people in that type of position means the next quarter. After the next quarter always has elapsed. And so I think we're probably safe until...
And we'll be reevaluated at that point.
I think we're probably safe until the end of March 2021, and then who knows what's going to happen to those Harmony servers.
Yeah.
So I mean...
So what does that mean for the end user? It means if you add new gear, you might be...
Right.
SOL.
Yeah. Like, so what is on your Harmony remote right now, that should continue to function. There's no reason why, because it doesn't have to phone home every time or anything like that. But as far as changing configurations in the software, adding new components to your setup, how long that'll continue to be supported, I wouldn't expect, new product models to be showing up on that. I mean, they might keep it going for years from now. I don't know.
Right. I really hope that because Harmony, when I first started with Harmony, you downloaded the program and everything was in the program. It was all on your computer. You never had there was no server-based garbage. And now it's all in the cloud, so they shut down the cloud and everything's gone. Yeah. I would hope that they would at the very least release a standalone program that you can download, and at least the community can then start to sideload, new product, new IR codes and stuff as they come available. But I'm not going to hold my breath for that.
It's all up in the air. We don't know. Yeah. I mean, we don't actually know that Harmony remotes are being discontinued, but it doesn't look promising. All of the accessories that used to be available for Harmony remotes, not even listed. Can't even find the pages anymore. If you go back in the Wayback Machine and try to use that link to bring it to you now, it's just a 404 page. Everything on the website is listed as sold out. Some retailers like Best Buy still have a few in stock that you can buy, but people who have ordered it through other websites, including just Amazon, they've had their orders just flat out canceled and told, nope, this product is not coming back. So not super promising. This day, I suppose, has been a long time coming. People have been looking at trying to find Harmony alternatives. It was, a lot of people called it, the best of the worst. It was like nobody truly loved most universal remote controls and how you had to program them, but Harmony had the most capability and was the most user-friendly, even though a lot of people didn't super-duper love it. But now...
I don't understand what's not to love about the thing, man.
I always liked them.
It's been totally easy to use. It's way better than Universal Remote Control that I had to program back in the day. That was a nightmare. So what are the alternatives here? We've got the Sofa Baton U1. Anyways, it's $50. Could be a decent alternative for the simpler IR-only Harmony models. In fact, it's a bit more advanced, and that also works with Bluetooth. You can't get it to set up an endless number of activities, but it has a single macro button, punch-through volume, and slots for 15 devices. There's the Roomy Remote, which is a $200 a lifetime or $50 a year subscription, I guess. That sucks. But could be used instead of the Harmony Hub Plus app, and there are hardware options for adding IR control. The Home Remote is $5. It's a software, I guess. It's super customizable, and you can add just about any type of control adapter to your network, but it isn't exactly user-friendly or plug-and-play. In the Neo, N-E-E-O Remote by Control4, it was originally a Kickstarter project, and it was originally standalone. It was $370 back in the day. It's now $600. That came with a Brain Hub, very similar to the Harmony Hub, but it's got bought by Control4, which is why it went from $370 to $600. So you'll have to get a whole Control4 system installed in order to use it, along with the limited user adjustability that comes with a professionally installed integration system. And that's the end of the list, and that's a crappy list. That is my official opinion on the list. Its official opinion is that it's garbage.
I mean, none of them are as nice as the Harmony system was. These are all definitely what I would, call an alternative. It is none of them.
Come on, some millionaire out there has got some money that can just buy Harmony and just be like,
I know, right?
just be like, I'm gonna just take this over for you guys, and then I'm just doing the remote stuff. Oop, I hit my camera. Sorry, guys. I'm just gonna do the remote stuff, and that's gonna be it. But clearly, that's not gonna happen.
I mean, Sound United is out there gobbling up everybody. Maybe they'll buy it. Come on, Sound United, do something for the home.
Come on,
fans.
Sound United, you can do it. Oh, can you imagine if they started shipping Harmony-style remotes with their receivers?
Right. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? The Heo suddenly is like the biggest thing on the market because it's totally integrated into all those different Harmony stuff. Oh, that would be great. Sound United, I think that's a good idea. Some comments here from our listeners. Clara on Twitter wanted to say that she previously owned some ported 18-inch power sound audio subs, but didn't think they were the greatest. The issue is that the driver they use is actually overpowered for their chosen amplifier, and the cabinets, as big as they are not actually big enough to properly match the driver or allow for long enough ports. It's fairly easy to overdrive the amplifier. The built-in protection was not effective, she said. And the iPal version is even worse. Yikes.
Yeah.
So given the price points, the Monoprice Monolith 15-inch models are where Clara would point people for maximum bang for buck output, especially with the dual 15-inch 2,000-watt M215 on sale for $2,000 right now. And if you want even more output than that, go to JTR. Power Sound Audio's 15-inch models make sense to Clara, but the 18-inchers were a disappointment. So there's a user review there from somebody who actually had them.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard so many people say so many bad things about, or very many bad things about Power Sound Audio, but the reality of most people is that they own maybe 3 pairs or 3 different speakers in their lifetime, maybe, and 2 subs, maybe. So having somebody that actually has experience with multiple subs and multiple speakers is unusual. So people tend to like what they have. So it's good to know that she at least had some comparison and thought that these were not up to her standard.
I mean, I will say, just by Power Sound Audio's own specs, in terms of the power handling capability of those 18-inch drivers versus the amplifier that they've paired them with, which is the same amplifier they use for their 15-inch models.
Right.
So it is clear that the 18-inch drivers are capable of handling twice as much power, at least, as the amplifiers that they've mated them to. So that headroom is available there. Being able to overdrive it, that's something. Like cranking it right up and having it actually start to make uneasy noises. That's a bit of a thing going on there. So I mean, for all we know, Power Sound Audio wishes they could use a more expensive amplifier, but it might be a parts thing or just economies of scale, whatever it is, hitting the price points they are. But in any case, the 15-inch models still get the stamp of approval. And I agree that the Monoprice Monolith subs are a very, very good value.
All right. So Nick wrote us a few weeks ago saying he needed new speakers for his living room, and since he already uses Sen Sierra speakers in his theater, he wanted to try something a little different. So he went with KEF Q-Series, the 350 bookshelves up front, the 150 bookshelves for surrounds. His wife immediately vetoed the 150s as surrounds. They were too big and stick out too much from the wall. But Nick wanted to hear the KEF speakers and auditioned them still. They were a nice upgrade over his existing Yamo satellites and sounded pretty neutral. But he had also bought some additional Ascend HTM 200 SE speakers to expand his theater setup, so he brought those into the living room to compare. His wife was much happier with their size. They would be acceptable as surrounds on the wall, and for Nick, they sounded better too. Not as much bass as the KEFs, but better detail and a better sense of front-to-back soundstage depth. They also cost less. So the KEFs were returned to Best Buy, and he'll be going all Ascend SE series in the living room. So there's another review from a listener of a comparison of the Q-Series KEFs to the Ascend. And it sounds to me like there was both a form factor issue here, as well as how he was placing them and where he's placing them was probably having some effect on the sound itself. And the KEFs themselves don't sound exactly the same as the Ascends. So he found the Ascends to be more pleasing, and now he knows, and he's can make informed decisions. That's great.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, everyone knows I am a fan of Ascend. I really like the tweeters in the SE series for the price point. I've said time and again, I think they're a cut above. If you're the type of person who pays a little bit more attention to high frequency detail, then they very well might be the thing that floats your boat. We've had people tell us the polar opposite, that they chose other speakers, including KEFs, over the Ascends for whatever reason. It was to their preference more. So, this is one person's opinion, but I've had people tell me both ways, like, why don't you tout the HTM 200 SEs even more? And then I'm like, I am the only person who touts them on a, public facing forum of any sort. So, can't win for trying.
And I think I reviewed the Q-Series tower speakers back.
I think
in
it was
the
like
day,
the previous generation of them, at least. But
yeah, and they were nice little tower speakers. I mean, I thought they were very inoffensive, and for the price point, I felt like they were pretty decent. So, and when I say inoffensive, that I'm saying neutral. They were neutral sounding. They did everything. They did nothing wrong. I wasn't like blown away by them. But then again, for the price point, I think I was pretty impressed, if I remember correctly. Jason wanted to let us know that he tried to order the Model 1700 from Anthony, which is isn't that the thing where you can extend your subwoofer or whatever?
It's the speaker. It's the wireless speaker kit where the wireless receiving units actually have amplifiers built into them.
Right.
So you can plug that. You can put regular passive speakers onto the receiving unit, and it will power them.
So they emailed him back to let him know that they are out of stock until February at this point. Told you. Gotta get on those purchases before Christmas. It's not a good time to order stuff. They also said the Model 1800 is expected to be back in stock around the same time. So if he doesn't want to wait that long, does it make sense to get the Outlaw OAW4 and plug the receiving side into a compact Class D stereo amp to power his surrounds? I mean, you can definitely do that.
You could definitely do that. I mean, that is what the Anthony Model 1700 is. It's just one extra piece, right?
One box.
The radio receiving unit is a separate box from the amplifier, whereas the Model 1700, they would be both of those things inside of the same case with one power supply. But absolutely, you can grab one of the, say, the Dayton or any of those nice little Class D, the Fosse Class D stereo amplifier, and plug it on into the OAW4 receiving unit. It will function perfectly fine.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, he's going for surrounds. If you were saying surround backs, I'd say wait. But because, I mean, there's no reason to stress yourself out about for surround backs.
2-3 months.
Surrounds? Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess if you got to get something, I definitely think that's a good way to go. Greg, so our first question here. All of the local TV broadcast stations in Greg's area have already upgraded to NextGen TV, aka ATSC 3.0. So he bought a Silicon Dust ATSC 3.0 network tuner and planned to swap out his ATSC 1.0 tuner. He uses Plex as an over-the-air DVR, and he can use either the Channels app or the HD Home Run app to watch broadcast live. All of those apps are available on his NVIDIA Shield Pro, his Apple TV 4K, and built into his 77-inch LG OLED. But he is having issues with the audio. The only device that seems to play the audio correctly is his OLED. The Shield and the Apple TV don't handle it properly. He's read it's because NextGen TV uses a new Dolby AC-4 audio codec, and it's simply a matter of that new codec not being supported yet. Via his LG OLED, everything about ATSC 3.0 seems pretty much improved over the 1.0 version. Both audio and video have better fidelity, and the multipath rejection is better, so he's looking forward to more 4K content arriving. But he won't be buying an LG OLED for every screen in this house, so do we know if the streaming boxes are going to receive updates to support the new AC4 audio codec? For YouTube guy who's screaming at a screen 6 months from now, yeah, we know it already came out. It came out. Yeah, we know it came out, but right now it's not here. And yes, it will eventually get integrated. And no, we have no idea when.
Right. So I mean, the LG OLEDs, now the G10, not the B10 or the C10, but the G10 in this year's lineup actually has a full ATSC 3.0 tuner built in. So you can plug that TV directly into a digital antenna and pull in NextGen TV broadcasts straight into that TV, no other equipment. Now, the C10 and B10, they don't have that tuner built in, but all the chips inside are the same, so it kind of makes sense that in terms of what codecs it's able to support. I don't know which one he has. Maybe he has a 77-inch G10, in which case, no surprise, because it has the full NextGen TV tuner built into it. But even if it is a C10 77-inch that he has, it's not super shocking that it would work because, like I say, all the internals are exactly the same. They just didn't put the entire tuner in there to connect it to the antenna. So yeah, our current streaming boxes, they don't have this codec built into them. It is software. Dolby already had white papers out about how AC-4 can be converted all the way back to just regular Dolby Digital. So I don't see much reason why a device like an NVIDIA Shield or an Apple TV 4K wouldn't have the processing power to do something like that. I think the software just needs to be written for it. Of course, famous last words. Who knows? Maybe the only way they're going to implement this is if there's hardware decoding for this new audio format. Certainly, if not the streaming devices you can buy right now today, definitely ones in the future will have this codec support built into them, whether it's direct decode or whether it's via translating it to just Dolby Digital Plus or something like that. But yeah, I guess I can't say for certain since that ability to translate it is out there as a software solution. I'd be kind of surprised if at least the more powerful boxes, like I say, NVIDIA Shield, Apple TV 4K, that are pretty darn powerful, I would be kind of surprised if they don't get an update at some point, but I guess I can't make any promises. That's as much info as I have. I don't have official info.
I mean, eventually it's going to happen.
Right.
I just can't imagine that it's not going to. When? We have no idea. And we don't even, I mean.
But it's possible it would involve buying a new streaming box to do it. But it's certainly, once ATSC 3.0 is widespread, it certainly will be supported. It'll just be another codec like all the other audio codecs we already have support for. And AC-4 will just be a new one.
Brian previously had dual Klipsch reference 12 SW subs, both at the front of his room. He just bought dual SVS PC-2000s as an upgrade, and this time he put them in diagonally opposite corners. He put the volume dials to their halfway point, left the phase at 0, and turned the crossover dials all the way up to where it says LFE. Mm-hmm. He ran his room correction and set the subwoofer trim levels to 0.5, plus 0.5. With all that, they sound way quieter than his old subs. Only the loudest of the low-frequency content seems to be playing. He manually increased the trim levels in his receiver to plus 6.5.
Mm-hmm. No, plus 6. He added 6 decibels.
But he still barely noticed any bass. Something seems off. Can we help?
He did send in an addendum, too, which was that eventually he just turned up the volume dials on the subwoofers themselves. They went from the 12 o'clock position to basically 2 o'clock. And he's like, now it sounds about equally as loud as what the Klipsch's used to sound like, but he was a little surprised. He expected the PC-2000s to instantly sound louder than the other ones because they have more power.
Right. So I don't know exactly how he did this. Like if he used the dual subwoofer outputs and on a receiver and had them calibrate individually, that sort of thing, in order to get to the plus 0.5.
Right.
So here's the dirty little secret about properly placing subwoofers compared to when you only had one or you improperly placed subwoofers, which is what was happening here. He had two subwoofers up front. And then he switched to new subwoofers and then put them in the right places. So what happens is when your sub is improperly placed, where you are sitting, it's very unpredictable about what differences in frequency volumes at different frequencies you're going to experience. So as the sounds bounce around the room, sometimes they'll hit each other. The sound waves will hit each other and add to each other. Sometimes they'll hit each other and cancel each other out, and sometimes they won't. It'll be the right volume as it's supposed to be. So say everything's supposed to be, let's just say 95 dB. That's loud, but let's pretend everything's supposed to be 95 dB, and you played a sweep. And you were sitting at your chair with both of your subwoofers up front. As the sweep went around, you would hear some volume would go way, way, way up, like usually to the point where it hurts. And then some would almost drop completely off where it was almost inaudible. And then the rest of it would be kind of around 95 dB. Which is where you want it to be. So you wanted it to be at 95 dB the whole time, but you got some that was way up at like 120 and some that was down at 70 or something like that. These are extreme examples. But so then you place your subs properly in your corners, and now it's 95 dB, plus or minus, let's say 3 or 4 dB all the way across. You're like, oh, okay, great. Now it's getting set. So then you go and you play content that you have played before, movies that you have played before. Now, where you were sitting and where you are sitting, where your subs were, occasionally some of those sounds would hit that loud frequency range where the frequencies were boosted because of the placement of the subwoofers in you. And suddenly you get this massive amount of bass. And this is bass that you're familiar with because you've heard it many times before because you've always had your subs placed where they are. But then when you put them where they're supposed to be, suddenly it's 95 dB where it's supposed to be. So right there, where it wasn't supposed to be super loud, it is no longer loud. And in fact, the only place you should hear loud is when it actually says, "Hey, play this loud." not have it be loud because of the room, but actually play it loud. So when I first installed dual subwoofers properly placed in my home theater, the first thing I thought was, it's quieter in here than it was before. It's not as loud. The bass, I'm not experiencing as much bass. So why is that? What's going on? And then we got to a scene where it was actually supposed to be loud, and suddenly my couch is shaking. But my couch is shaking, and I'm not covering my ears. The couch is shaking. I'm feeling the bass. I'm hearing the bass, but it doesn't feel overblown. It feels the right amount of bass for the scene. And then when that scene goes away, the bass feels normal again, or it seems to go away because that's basically what it's asking for. So what Brian here is experiencing is what we all experience when we first properly place subs. So what Brian is saying is that in order to get in his room where he was experiencing those peaks, he was getting about +6 decibels.
At least.
At those peaks. So in order for him, I mean, even more really, because he set it up to +6, and then he turned the volume dials up even
I'm
more.
not sure if
so
everything
it's
stayed,
way
but,
past that. Yeah, so we're way past this at this point. So he is trying to get back to that peak level for all the bass. But the reality is you were hearing too much bass at some frequencies and you got used to it. So now you expect to hear it all the time. You are hearing, if your room is rectangular and you have placed your subs properly and they are properly calibrated and everything else, which we're assuming they are, then you should put it back down to 0.5. You should put your volume knobs back to 12 and or just run Odyssey again. And that is the bass that you're supposed to be experiencing. Before you were hearing improper bass, now you're going to be hearing good bass. My thought is, if you do this, there's two things that can happen. One, when you get to the really loud scenes that are supposed to be really loud, you will have already kind of pegged how loud your subs can go in your room, and or gotten pretty close to that. So the variance between the super loud scenes and the not, what was supposed to be not loud, the limiters in the SVSs are going to start kicking in, and you're not going to hear that great a difference that you're supposed to be hearing. And the second is that you will hear no difference. It will be the same amount the entire time. Those are the things that I think could be happening.
Yeah, there's another facet to this as well, which was that the PC-2000 cylinders, they come with the isolation feet already on them.
That's true.
And
That's true. I didn't think
the
about
Klipsch's
that.
didn't, so there's every likelihood you were actually getting quite a physical sensation of your floors and walls physically shaking with those Klipsch subwoofers, which is no longer happening with the PC-2000s because they have these rubberized cushion isolation feet on them, not transmitting the physical vibration. And that is a large part of our perception of bass, is the physical part of it. But it's actually a form of distortion if it's there when it's not supposed to be there. It's not just the sound waves creating a tactile feeling in you. It's the structure of your house physically shaking, which it's not actually supposed to do. It's supposed to be the sound that moves you. So there's that facet to it as well. I will, of course, just mention, I don't know if you went through my entire 12-step guide to setting up dual subwoofers. Probably not. Didn't really seem like it. You don't necessarily have to go through every single step in there, but it would benefit you, I think, to read through it, because basically I just want you to get the concept in mind that try to just get the bass in your room working independent of everything else. It's your foundation. Let's lay the foundation before worrying about anything else. And if you go through the 12-step guide, you don't necessarily have to go through the painstaking part of adjusting the phase knob, because if your room is rectangular and enclosed and you have your subs in diagonally opposite corners, you shouldn't really need to go through the painstaking part, which is the trial and error with the phase knob. But the other parts about getting everything level matched beforehand, playing your bass sweeps so that you hear for yourself, oh yes, that bass sweep actually, to my human ears, does now sound very even and uniform in volume throughout the entire bass sweep. Now you know at least consciously in your mind, okay, it's playing the signal as it should. That signal said, play all these frequencies one after another in a sweep, all at the same volume, and that is in fact what I'm hearing. Now with that knowledge in mind, you can go listen to your content, and if it sounds different than what you were expecting or used to, you go, oh, well, that's actually what the content sounds like. You're under no obligation to prefer it, but I would encourage you to give it a try for a while, get used to it for a while, and then if you say, I mean, most of us, even once we're used to it, we go, I'd like a little bit more, and you boost it up like 3 decibels, and you go, that just feels better. And that's totally fine. But try to get, at least give yourself that baseline of, oh, now I know what accurate reproduction of the bass truly sounds like. I know it's playing accurately because I played that sweep, and start from there.
Yeah, it's akin to having spent, and this is an older reference, but the RPMs on your vinyl, your record player, right? If you just left it in one spot, no matter the size of the record or what it was supposed to be, and then you listen to an album over and over again, and somebody comes in and says, no, that's supposed to be, and they change it, and suddenly it sounds completely different, and you're like, wait, I liked it the old way. Like, yeah. It's wrong.
Well, the other part is that, you let's forget subwoofers. You get a new 200 or 300 watt per channel amplifier. And you go, well, I have all these extra watts. Shouldn't it just be blowing me out of my chair? And I mean, like, I can tell you from personal experience, the better amplification that I got coming from like my entry-level Kenwood where I started, that had a noise floor to it. Like now, I actually play my system quieter than that old system because I don't have a noise floor anymore. Yes, I have both more watts, but I also have a quieter noise floor. So having more power in your system doesn't necessarily equate to everything sounding louder. To do that, you just turn the volume dial up.
And I'm actually going to refer back to our first, I think it was the first question with the KEF speakers, the KEF, and he's like, they had more bass, right? But then the other one sounded a little bit, cleaner, and the higher end was better. Well, it could be, depending on how, I'm just going to ignore that. I'm not making any judgments about these speakers. But if you have a speaker that is focused on giving you more bass, or you shove it in the corner so that it gives you more bass, then suddenly the higher end doesn't sound as clear because it's being muddied. Yeah, it's getting masked by all that extra bass. And when you are in your theater and your subwoofers are improperly placed and you're getting these massive humps in there, it's masking what you should be hearing and all the detail in there. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with you saying, I just want it to be louder. No one's going to stop you from doing that. It's your theater. But we would like you to at least experience it the way it was intended before you decide that it's not.
There is a little note on the sounding louder too, because when you have no distortion anymore, things don't sound quote unquote louder to our brain. It can be the case where you turn the volume dial up and it just seems like everything kind of keeps getting closer to you, but not louder. It's a weird effect when you have no distortion anymore.
Think about when you're driving in the car, right? Yeah. So you're driving a car on the highway, and maybe you've got your windows cracked, maybe you don't. It doesn't matter. But you pull up to you get off the highway, you pull up to the stop sign, you're like, the radio is super loud. How did the radio get so loud? And you turn it down because you suddenly don't have all that background noise, and that's what happens when you get those dual subs and they're playing the equal volume that you're at there across all the frequency range. They're not adding noise to your system, so you're not having to turn it up as loud. All right, that's enough of that. Martin, this comes from Denmark, which is, the land of Macbeth, right? Is that right? That's right. I feel like Macbeth was set in Denmark. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So Martin has sold his house and bought a new one. Just don't kill your uncle in the house. I think that's like 7 years bad luck, and then you get poisoned by your mom. I don't remember. The new house, unfortunately, will not have a dedicated home theater. He'll be using his living room, so he needs new speakers. His 5 JBL SVA 1500s do not have a living room friendly appearance. They are horn-loaded MTM designs, black boxes, and super ugly, I guess is the way I would describe them.
And
is that a front slotted port?
They are not small.
They're not small. So he already owns some KEF LS-X speakers, and he loves their sound. So he figured he'd go with their bigger brothers, the KEF LS50, in the living room. He'd likely be sitting about 10 feet away, 13 feet at the most. But of course, the brand new LS50 Meta version is out now. Are they really worth it? He can find discounted or used LS50s for quite a bit less. And he has the budget available for the LS50 Metas? If they are really worthwhile, what do we say? So I did the modicum of research a while ago when this first came out, just to kind of get an idea. And what they're purporting to do with this meta material is the back wave off of the tweeter.
That's right.
Is going to be absorbed more readily by that hockey puck thing they got back there, the plastic hockey puck thing that's full of tubes. There is no version of their marketing material that can convince me to buy that instead of the other ones. If I can get a discount, now if they're the same price, I'll buy the new ones, sure.
Okay.
But if I can get a discount on the LS50s, I'm taking the LS50s, and you can keep that meta for yourself. I mean, I don't care about that hockey puck.
Yeah,
I just don't.
Over at AVXL, Robert Heron and Patrick Norton, they did at least one of them. I can't tell. That's one of those podcasts where I can't tell those two guys' voices apart. they sound almost identical unless they identify themselves. So whoever it was of those two gentlemen who did review it, he's like, yeah, reviewed the LS50s, listening to them critically. He's like, I can hear it wasn't just the metamaterial absorber behind it. It is a new generation of the UniQ driver that they're using. Yeah. They changed some of the bracing inside the cabinet. So there were some small changes. He's like, yeah, if I'm listening critically, it's like, in certain areas of the mid-range, there seems to be a little bit extra clarity. If you're cranking them really loud, there's like a little bit less distortion in the new LS50s metas. He's like, if you already have LS50s, don't pay more to upgrade. If you can find LS50s at a good discount, which is the case right now, get those. So that was their opinion. I have no reason to suspect that I should dispute that opinion. It sounds very, very reasonable to me that would be the case. Once they're back to being the same price, by all means, grab the metas. But right now, if you want to, and you're able to get the original LS50s at a discount, I think that's the way to go.
Mitch and Andrew both want to know more about curtaining the frequency range where Odyssey EQ is applied. The Odyssey Editor app allows you to set frequency limits beyond which EQ won't be applied, and the general advice seems to be to limit Odyssey EQ to 500 to 300 hertz. So that's really only EQing the bass. Andrew gave it a try, but he couldn't hear any difference at all versus running Odyssey normally. So what is the benefit supposed to be? How noticeable should it be? And if you don't hear any difference, does that indicate you did something wrong? No, dude, let me tell you something about these guys online.
Well, I mean, in this particular topic will be that will include Gene DeLaSalle over at Audioholics, because he's a fan of curtaining the response on the EQ.
Yeah, this is more about theory than it is about application or practicality, in my opinion. In theory, what Odyssey is best at is doing certain frequency ranges, and it varies. Some people will say, nothing past this point or nothing above this point, and blah 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 blah. I don't care what any of these people say. All right, objectively or subjectively, in this case, subjectively, you run it with the curtaining and without the curtaining. I will bet about any amount of money that you cannot ABX this, meaning you cannot tell in a blind test which one is which. I don't care how good you think your ears are and how good you think your system is. I bet that in your system with your ears, you won't be able to tell the difference. The differences will be minor. They may be measurable, but I doubt they will be something that you will hear in your room. So from a person who is not only been in this business for a long time, but is extremely lazy when it comes to such things, there's no force on earth that will ever get me to do this, what they're talking about here. I'm just not, I'm not doing it. I took that little notch out once.
That's right. The 2 kilohertz, the notch there. Yep.
Never noticed a difference in that, and since then I was like, well, that was too much trouble. Taking a notch out is like clicking a button. It was too much trouble for me to do it twice in a row.
Tom, you didn't play a sweep slow enough. You got to play a really slow frequency sweep.
Yeah.
And then you might hear the beat in there where the notch is in there.
And so I was reading this week about diffraction, and because I was kind of doing some reading about like that felt they like to put around tweeters, the tweakers do for their thing, and the whole idea of what it's supposed to do and everything. And I'm like, and then in the end, I finally found somebody who was like reasonable about it, and he wrote a whole article about how it works and why it works and what it works. And he says at the end, "You'll never hear it." It will never make a difference to you, but you could do it if you want to. He goes, only the worst design speakers in the world will ever need this felt on there. In even those, you could probably not hear it. So I'm like, okay. And that's what I feel like this is. This is just playing with buttons to play with buttons and to feel like you've done something to your system. It's okay that engineers have figured out things for you. You don't have to tweak it to make it better. It's probably fine.
So a lot here in the Odyssey and the Odyssey Editor app system, and whether you're using these curtains to say only this range of frequencies get EQ'd and nothing above this range gets EQ'd, a lot has to do with whether you actually follow the directions on how to position the microphone and make use of all 8 microphone measurement positions as Odyssey recommends that you do. So the theory there's a couple of different theories out there. The one theory, which is basically just the fear-mongering of the 2-channel only crowd, which says, you paid all this money for your speakers to have a characteristic sound to them, and if you go and equalize the mid-range and treble, then you're taking away the characteristic sound that you paid for. That isn't entirely true, just full stop, but if you have measured in more than just one position, it also won't happen. Because what Odyssey does is take a spatial average. It takes all 8 of those measurements that are in different locations, and it averages out the response and then tries to equalize that. And the part of the criticism of equalizing above the bass region is that mid-range and treble is too directional to equalize effectively. If you measure in only one location and then equalize that measurement to be a perfectly flat line, you'll have made everywhere, either side of you, in front of you, behind you, above, below you, you'll have made every other location demonstrably worse than it ever would have been if you just left it alone. Because you're going to have humps now that are much too big and dips that are much too big, whereas, but in reality, when you do this with the Odyssey system and take all 8 measurement locations, it has enough data to say, well, yes, in this one location, I could make the line flatter if I boosted it here and cut it here, but if I did that, I'd make the other 7 measurements that I took worse. Right. So in reality, it ends up doing very little equalization to the mid-range and treble, and you can see this in people's measurements when they've actually done all 8 measurements as they're supposed to and actually move the microphone around as Odyssey directs you to in their instructions. When you do that, you see that the equalization applied to the mid-range and treble is very, very slight. Sometimes you'll see the little high frequency roll-off. That's part of the Odyssey reference curve. You'll see that being applied. But other than that, it does essentially nothing because the part of the theory saying that the frequencies are too directional at those high frequencies for EQ to be effective, like, that's actually true, and it's a good thing because then it doesn't touch it, because it would make it worse in 7 other places if it made one location better. So, Andrew, you are definitely not crazy for not having heard a difference, because I really wouldn't expect you to, unless you had speakers that were like crazy bright and you used the Odyssey reference curve instead. Then you might hear the high frequency roll off. I will say, though, that I don't have a big problem using this in real life on the models that only have Mult-EQ, not Mult-EQ XT and not Mult-EQ XT32, which do a pretty decent job. But regular Mult-EQ, I have definitely had instances of using that where it did more harm than good. Even taking the multiple measurements in the correct locations, it did make some audible changes, particularly like in the lower mid-range where you can hear it, that did more harm than good with the regular Mult-EQ system. So if you give it a try and you're like, hey, I actually prefer the results where I didn't equalize anything above 250 hertz, 300 hertz or something like that, I'm not going to say you're insane. That could be the case. Sure. I've experienced it myself. But by and large, and particularly if you're on the XT or the XT32 system, and you measure properly, it's not going to make a difference.
There you go. Yeah. Infinite Gary says, what's a home theater purchase decision that we struggled with, where we kept going back and forth debating it with ourselves? How did it end up working out? Gary finds himself agonizing over whether to spring for the new Anthem AVM9D Pre-Pro, since he'll be upgrading from the Anthem Statement D2, or follow advice and get the much more reasonably priced AVM70 instead. Well, we all know he's not going to get the reasonably priced one.
This is Gary.
This is Gary. So, Gary, you're not agonizing. You're pretending to agonize for our benefit. I don't know why.
Don't sweat it.
I agonize over every decision I often put things and this is not just AV. I put things in my Amazon cart or in something and just let them sit there for a while until I'm sure I want to get them. I do that. I've been I think I've mentioned on this podcast. I've been cycling once a week with a friend of mine. I say that you buy the bike and you earn the spandex. So I finally feel like I've biked enough that I can go on 30 miles. I went 30 miles on Sunday morning and felt fine the next day. So I figured I must have earned it. So I'm getting myself some little outfits so I can be a goober like all the rest of them out there. But I've been really enjoying it. But it took me like weeks to get to figure out what was going to be the best one that I thought was the least expensive and got the best reviews and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, biggest one I think was certainly the Axiom speakers that I bought way back in the day. And that wasn't because I agonized over them. It was just that, I was waiting for, I'm going to say permission, but I was going to, my wife and I, we were freshly married, only a couple of years. We just had a kid, a year or so before that. And maybe is that even right? Yeah, we'd already had the kid maybe a couple of years before that, and we had just bought a house. So there was a lot of purchases, a lot of change in our life. We'd moved across country and everything. So there was no buying of stuff, but I was already researching. I had been researching for years. So that's the one I agonized the most over. That was only because I had the most time, but I really did have a spreadsheet that I just kept changing, and I would have full sets of speakers and then read a review and something else, or a new speaker would come out, and I'd be like, okay, it's going to be this one instead, and I do price comparisons and everything else. But I guess most recently, if you want to talk about most recently, it was the 2-channel amp that I bought to power my overhead speakers. And that was simply because I went down the rabbit hole. I started with the amp I ended up with, and then I was looking at Monolith 9-channel amps or 7-channel amps or something like that before I finally reined myself in and just bought the 2-channel version that I really needed. So I guess that would be the most recent one.
Yeah, the one I remember struggling with, I've mentioned it before, but it was when I really wanted a Pioneer Kuro, but the Samsung plasmas were right there at not even half the price. It's still a plasma, and I was only going for like the 50-inch size at that time. I was like, well, I could get the 42-inch Pioneer Kuro, but I'm like, those ones had like the 1028 by 7 something or other resolution, and they had like the rectangular pixels, and it wasn't the size I wanted. And I didn't have the money at the time, so that one, I ended up with the Samsung. I did enjoy it, but I always regretted it. And honestly, in the grand scheme of things, I don't regret having gone through that, because ever since then, I was just like, wait until you've got enough money to get the thing you want, and then get the thing you want, Rob. And it's made my purchasing decisions since then a lot easier, and I've purchased stuff that is expensive, but I'm like, that's what I wanted. I wouldn't have been truly happy with anything less, and so I feel good with that. But that was the one I agonized over.
So Gary has been experimenting lately in his smaller room where he has 7.2.4. He's tried moving one of his subs to a spot directly behind his seat, near field, but he hasn't run a full calibration every time. He just wanted to hear if having a sub that close would make it localizable, and whether it would make any difference to the tactile feel of the bass, since he's toying with the idea of expanding to 3 or 4 subwoofers. If he did so, they'd have to go near field. So he has a 7.2.4, just moved one of the subs out of the corner or wherever it was. And then
he has one in the front corner, and one's actually on his side wall. So he moved the side wall one directly behind his seat, very near field.
So he says it seemed to mostly be upside. Bass was definitely stronger with greater tactile feel, but it wasn't localizable. So what do we think? Since the Anthem AV-M90 can run up to 4 independent subs, would having 2 subs in locations across the room from one another, plus another 1 or 2 subwoofers near field, be a good idea? Well, that's not what you're doing. So let's just if you want us to take it in the theoretical sense, as long as you have an even number and they're mirrored, it doesn't matter where you put them in the room. Really.
Okay. Well, so, that's for the even, uniform, sounds good in every seat theory. Right. I mean, what he's proposing is basically the mid-bass module idea of you have your main subwoofers.
But he's not. Yeah. He's not running a mid-bass module. He's not running that subwoofer up close as being the top end of the bass and the ones in the corners or wherever, and as the bottom. He's running them all full, all subwoofer full range. So I guess in theory, Gary, if you were to say to me, I have a rectangular room or a square, I don't really care, and you put 2 subs in opposing corners and then 2 subs on either side of your couch, which is in the middle of your room, then you've essentially created, 4 subs that are mirrored from at least one other sub, if that makes sense. So I don't necessarily. What I think you should do in this case is leave your 2 subs into the corners, or the opposing corners or the mid side walls, and then if you want more tactile feel, get a bass shaker or a tactile transducer and do it that way.
What's interesting, what's going on with
cheaper.
What Gary has done in this experiment is that, like I say, he had 1 sub in his front left corner, he had 1 sub on his right-hand side wall. He moved that subwoofer that was on his right-hand side wall, like pretty much directly behind his seat. But now it is, and now he's got front wall, back wall. They're not diagonally opposite corners, but he's got front wall, back wall. Still 2 subs. Now, he didn't change the calibration on that second subwoofer, the one that used to be on the right side wall and is now directly behind his seat. He didn't change the calibration on that. So it is, in fact, at the moment, uncalibrated, too loud. So what you really experienced is just bass that is too loud. Too loud in terms of being truly accurate to the calibration and the signal, but you found things that you enjoyed about it. So, we're back to that situation of, we know Gary has spent a lot of time listening, a lot of time experimenting, has been focused on wanting accurate sound, but he just discovered through this experiment that, bass that is boosted up a little bit higher than it should be is actually kind of fun and actually kind of enjoyable. I wouldn't necessarily say that the way to achieve this in your new setup that you've got coming up is to add a 3rd subwoofer that is near field while having the 2 others where they used to be. I think you might just want to turn your subwoofers up a little bit louder from time to time and have some fun with it, because in effect, that's really all you've done in this experiment. It is still...
Well, and we don't know how it changed the
frequency response,
standing waves in the standing waves in the room either, because first of all, they weren't from one's in the front wall, one's in the side wall, they weren't mirrored. No. So we don't know what was going on with standing waves, and then he moves that sub without recalibrating it, changed the standing waves completely. So now maybe he's got standing waves in areas that are more enjoyable to him than the ones that they were before. So if you want the tactile feel, add a tactile transducer. Okay. If you like that there was extra bass and it felt better, then turn up both the subs, or just turn up the trim on your receiver or whatever you end up buying. And if you want both, do both. No one's gonna stop you. So that's my advice. Mario, gave us the bonded ground advice from back when we were talking about how to properly ground your house. If I remember correctly.
That's right.
At the moment, Mario has a Panasonic Plasma. Apparently, I'm from Boston. In his family room, and his PS4 is in the family room too. But his AV receiver and cable box are a 40-foot HDMI cable run away in his basement. He's using a 40-foot Monoprice red mirror HDMI cable, and it is run inside of conduit, so replacing it is physically possible. He just bought the new Vizio P-Series 4K TV, and he'll add a PS5 as soon as it's possible to actually get one. Good luck with that. He was also thinking he might get the new Google Chromecast with Google TV. His current receiver is a Denon S930H, so it does not have eARC, only regular ARC or audio return channel. And he's got a 5.1.2 Atmos configuration. So what will he need in order to get Atmos audio once he has added the PS5 and Chromecast, new receiver, new HDMI cable? What? Yes. But really, no, because the receivers don't work with stuff right now. But it does work with the PS5. It seems. Yeah,
well, you will need a new AV receiver. One way or another, you're going to need a new AV receiver, because you will either plug the PS5 directly into your Vizio P-Series, which is what I would probably recommend. Not the least of which is just the controller signal. If your PS5 is going to be physically 40 feet away from you in the basement, I'm not sure the PS5's controller is going to go through the floor from 40 feet away and be responsive. So you're probably going to have the PS5 in the family room, just like you have your PS4 in the family room with the TV. So if you plug the PS5 directly into your Vizio P-Series, first of all, you're going to be able to enjoy the 4K 120 hertz that way. And then you would be relying on eARC. So in order to use the enhanced audio return channel, you're going to have to get a new AV receiver. Should mention, of course, Atmos is only applicable in the case of the PS5 when playing back Blu-ray discs or Ultra HD Blu-ray discs, as it has no Atmos support for streaming services and it has no Atmos support for games. So it is only as a physical Blu-ray player that we're talking about this. But regardless, you of course have the option of outputting 7.1 uncompressed audio from the PS5 for games.
Right.
And to do that, you would need the enhanced audio return channel. So in that scenario, you'd need a new AV receiver, one that supports eARC. If you were to try the PS5 is in the basement and you're going to pass this through, well, then you'd need a new AV receiver that can pass through the 4K 120 and all that stuff, which your current one can't. So either way, you need a new AV receiver. Now, I think it makes more sense to keep the PS5 in the family room with your TV because you're going to have to wait for an AV. Well, I guess the AV receivers you can buy right now can pass through 4K 120 from the PS5, but we don't know if variable refresh rate is going to work if and when that comes with the updates. So keep the PS5 in the room with the TV. You'll need a new AV receiver for eARC. Now, for eARC, okay, try it with the HDMI cable you have right now because it's not a bandwidth problem. There's no real reason why audio going through the enhanced audio return channel should have a problem going through your current HDMI cable in terms of bandwidth, but eARC does rely on having the Ethernet connection, the HDMI with Ethernet connection, and I don't know if your Monoprice Redmere HDMI cable has the Ethernet connection. If it's one of the older ones, then it probably doesn't, because the ones when they actually marketed them as Redmere, when that was the name, I don't think they had Ethernet. Regardless, though, give it a try, because why buy a new HDMI cable if you don't have to? But it's possible that you will need to get a new HDMI cable. But yeah, give it a try first. There you go. You're getting a new AV receiver. That's the long and short of it.
There you go. Did we kind of answer this? He should use a similar setup to what he has now. Correct PS5 plugged into his new Vizio TV, and then use ARC or eARC to send the audio down to the AV receiver in his basement. What about Chromecast? Better to plug that straight into the TV or plug it into the receiver downstairs. Well, again, you have the remote control issue.
Yeah,
because that's the new Chromecast has a remote control. Right. So I think you're back to play. You might as well just move it all upstairs. That's what I say.
That could be
everything's going to be upstairs except for, what's going to be downstairs at this point?
That could be a lot of rewiring.
Your cable box?
All the speaker wire has been run down to the basement and all that.
That's
a whole rigmarole. But yeah, honestly, just like Tom alluded to, the remote control is the main reason I'm thinking you should probably just keep the Chromecast in the family room, plug directly into your Vizio TV. ARC or eARC is going to work perfectly fine there. Because
unless it works with like Harmony or whatever else, he must be using some sort of Harmony or type of remote.
Yeah, I don't.
So if it works with that, then you can keep it downstairs. But PS5 is Bluetooth, isn't it? It's Bluetooth.
Well, it's also its controller. You're not going to replace its game controller with a Harmony remote. So
no, like if he's got some sort of extender that's sending IR back down to his basement.
Yeah, I think they're both Bluetooth.
Bluetooth's not going to. Yeah.
The Chromecast and the PS5.
Well, you're probably. I think you're look. Everything's going to go upstairs, boy.
Yep.
Eric said he just started listening to us a couple months ago. Yay, Eric. Hey, woo, new listener. He has plans for a dedicated, fully enclosed rectangular home theater in his basement with 2 large DIY subwoofers, but with the plans he has, there's no room to put one of the subs at the front of the room and the other sub at the back of the room. Instead, they will both be in the front wall behind his false wall and acoustically transparent screen. Listening to us, he's a bit concerned now. He's also heard us talking about pressurizing the space with bass. So, is the placement of 2 subs any less critical if they're able to fully pressurize the room? No.
The opposite.
It is even more critical that they are placed correctly. So I know you want to DIY this thing, but maybe you DIY one of them and then you buy a cylinder sub or something that will have a smaller footprint or can lie down or something. And just remember, the sub literally does not care what the shape of the box is.
No.
So if the problem is the box design that you have in mind is too wide or too fat or too deep or whatever, you can make it like a soffit on the ground.
Yeah.
You
or a big
your
tall
couch
column that's built into your back wall now.
As long as the port's the same and the driver's the same and the amp's the same and the internal volume's the same and the bracing is still reasonable, the sub does not care about the shape of the box, which is why the cylinder subs and the box subs that are both ported have the exact same response. Right. The graphs don't look different because it doesn't care. It doesn't care.
I think conceptually, and I think this is true for a lot of people, conceptually they're thinking, okay, I've got sound coming out of this big subwoofer at the front of my room and sound coming out of this big subwoofer at the back of my room. So that's what's responsible for making it sound very nice and even in all of my room, is because I had them on opposite sides and they're both able to fully pressurize the room. So if they're both able to fully pressurize the room, it doesn't really matter where I put them, right? You're still going to fully pressurize the room, both of them playing loud. But that is not what's going on with bass frequencies. With bass frequencies being so long, and if we're talking 20 hertz, 55, 56 feet long, doesn't, the type of room that you're going to construct is not going to have any dimension that is 56 feet long, and certainly not all three dimensions being that long, which means that anytime 20 hertz is playing, or any frequency that's longer than the shortest dimension of your room, which is almost certainly going to be the height of your room, it means that that sound has traveled across the room in that dimension at least, bounced off of that opposite surface, come back, and maybe done so multiple times before your brain ever registered that that sound existed. So when you have two subwoofers both fully capable of pressurizing the room on their own, and that's what we want. We don't want to pair one sub that is capable of pressurizing the room with a sub that isn't. We want two identical subs, both capable of pressurizing the room on their own, because what makes the bass sound uneven when you only have one of them, or when you have both of them at the front of your room, is that because these sound waves are bouncing back and forth, they fold back on themselves, and where they fold back on themselves and double up, you get these huge humps, and where they fold back on themselves and cancel out, you get these nulls, and from seat to seat, you have wildly different experiences for your audience members. So that's what it's about. It's about evening out that response, to not have these big humps and these big dips at any seat. To do that, you really want to position them properly.
They Dr. Toole and the Harman group, modeled.
That's right.
Subwoofers in a rectangular room and put them in all the different spots, and then came up with the recommendations that we're giving you. But they didn't stop there. They had a room.
Yes.
They put the subwoofers in there, and they measured them and said, empirical evidence that our theories were correct. Yep. And it worked. So, yes, I know you want to put them both up at the front.
Sure.
And that's great, but don't.
I mean, the thing is,
you can help it.
Eric is at the stage of planning. He has not begun construction on this yet. And I know what a pain it is to have plans that are close to finalization and go, oh, this is looking great. I'm maybe going to commission these subs, or I'm going to start building them, or I've got the plans and I'm all ready to go. And then we come along and tell you, you're going to want to put one of those subs in a different location. And that's going to require, I don't know how many changes, but honestly, Eric, you're in a good position in that you're not so far down the path of having done this that there's no turning back. Yes, it's a pain.
Right.
I completely sympathize with that. But if you care enough to ask, then you care enough to take on the task of modifying the plans that you have to make this work. Because you were after an end result. You weren't after a pretty looking diagram that, once you actually construct the thing, doesn't perform the way you wanted it to. You're after the end result performance. So hopefully you'll be able to go, okay, it sucks, but I'm going to rearrange these plans to get the end result that I really want.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. I mean, I agree with what Rob's saying there, that it is sort of irksome to have somebody tell you, wait a second, that's not going to work the way you think it's going to work. You should not do that. And then everybody's like, but we plans, everything was going to be behind a false wall, and it was going to be beautiful and clean. And everything's going to be in wall and blah, 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 blah. Put a false wall at the back too. I don't care. Put 4 false walls and this false ceiling in there. That'd be great. We could put it whatever we want behind those false walls. But if you're really looking for performance, and you want to make sure it's as good as possible, then you're going to want to put subs, in the places that we tell you to put subs. So he's looked at Rob's 12-step guide. How much of a compromise will it be to have both subs up front? And should he plan to go through all 12 steps, even though his room will be a perfect rectangle? You did not read the thing. If you think that putting that having the perfect rectangle was the deciding factor, it is all about where they are placed. If they are not placed in mirrored locations, then you have to go through every step, and it is maddeningly tedious. I would expect that if H.P. Lovecraft was around, Cthulhu would have written this thing. Okay, this would be a Cthulhu ritual in order to summon his, some of his power or whatever. It is a compromise. It is, and even following Rob's 12 steps and doing the best you can with it, and measuring and getting the mic from Cross Spectrum Labs and
oh man,
Room
if you really want to drive yourself nuts, yes.
Going through all of that, if you go through all of that, it still won't be as good had you done none of it and just put one at the front, one at the back.
Yeah, if you want to take some of the sting of potentially modifying your plans and changing some of the ideas that you had in mind during the planning stage, if you want to take some of the sting out of that, you can console yourself with the knowledge that if you do change the plans and you get the subs in, say, the middle of your front wall and middle of your back wall, or in diagonally opposite corners, or maybe they're in the middle of the two side walls now. But if you do that and your room is a perfect rectangle, then now you can stop at step 4 of my 12-step guide. Now you don't have to mess around with the painstaking trial and error phase knob thing, but only if you get the subwoofers properly positioned. If you insist on still having both subs at the front of your room, then you must go through all 12 steps of the guide, because that is the whole point of the guide, is saying when you have a room that is either not a rectangle or you do have a rectangle, but the subs are not optimally positioned, that's when you do need to do the rest of the steps.
So we've mentioned that if you can't put the two subs perfectly across the room from one another, at least spread them as far apart as possible. I've never said that.
I've said that. That's what's in the 12-step guide. Try to get them as close to across the room as you can. If if placement dictates, this is an existing room, that you simply cannot put the subs in diagonally opposite corners or midpoints of the walls, try to get them across the room as much as possible. That's what I said.
But does that refer to the drivers or the ports? The box. It doesn't really matter what the ports and the drivers are. The physical, because and we talked about this. These bass waves are so long that as they exit, they wrap around the subwoofer. They are, we say they're omnidirectional. So the smaller the sound wave is, and the shorter the wavelength, the more directional it is. And the lower it is, or the longer the wavelength is, the more omnidirectional it is. And these are so low that they exit the subwoofer, wrap completely around the box, and go in all directions. So it doesn't matter, as long as you're not facing the port into a wall or the driver directly into a wall, where you're physically, compressing the air in front of it, or inhibiting the air from escaping, or stopping the driver from moving. It doesn't make any difference. You can place the driver, say it's in the back left corner or back corner. You can have it facing one side or the other, or directly straight, diagonally across the room. It doesn't matter. The base is omnidirectional, so it's going to wrap around that. Just don't face it towards a wall. Yeah. So,
and if you do have, like, for example, let's say, you weren't able to get the subwoofers optimally positioned, but you have them spread out as much as you can, and then you're following that 12-step guide. And so let's say you've done that once, and then for whatever reason you rotate one of the subs. You rotate it around 90 degrees. Will it sound exactly the same? Not necessarily. You might have to do the painstaking phase thing again, but the point is that if you just place the subs and then go through the trial and error phase thing, that will sort out any issues between having rear-facing ports, or like a down-facing driver and rear-facing port or something like that. It's not that it's identical sound no matter which way you face it, but once you've calibrated it by adjusting the phase relative to each other, then that takes care of any of those concerns. It's not that it has to begin with the subwoofer driver and the ports facing a certain direction. That isn't important.
Right. And remember, too, if the problem here is that there's only like one spot in your back wall that you could even possibly put a subwoofer, and it's not the midpoint and it's not the corner, that's okay. Say it's like 2 feet in from the side wall, on the back, and you're like, this spot I could actually put it, but it's not in the midpoint and it's not in the corner. That's okay. Then take your, if it says it's 2 feet in from the back left corner along the back wall, well, then take your sub up front, put it 2 feet in from the front right corner on the front wall, and now they're mirrored.
And we know you got a big old false wall up front, so up front you've got pretty good latitude along that front wall.
Yes. Yeah. So if there's just one spot in the back wall that you can place it, just mirror that up front. and you've followed our instructions, and
Yes.
Bob's your uncle. Okay. Jacob, he's part of the 2 Hour Plus Club. Jacob will be moving. His new place will have a basement where he can finish off a dedicated rectangular home theater, approximately 14 by 20 feet.
Congrats.
In his current place, he owns DefTech BP-9040 towers with built-in 8-inch powered woofers. I'm not saying subwoofers. I'm not saying it because it's not true. And a CS-9040 center. His surrounds and surround backs are all in ceiling at the moment and won't be moving with him. He needs to buy new surrounds. He likes his DefTech speakers, but what do we think he should do? Get 2 more BP-9040 towers? No, I don't think that, but here we go. Would the 4 self-powered 8-inch subwoofers drivers instantly give him 4 subwoofers, or do we think he should get dual SVS SP-2000 Pro subwoofers instead? I do not think I always think tower speakers for surrounds are questionable because they're not high enough to go over the top of your couch most of the time, which means you have to put them on a little step or stand or something. And second, they're super expensive for not really needing it. Now, you probably don't want to hear this, but we've said it 1,000 times, so I don't know why you'll be surprised at this, but you should be crossing those things over even though they have the powered subwoofers in them.
Like at the moment,
hertz.
he doesn't have any separate subwoofers, so he's running his BP 9040s. I don't know if he's running them full range and telling his AV receiver he has no subwoofer, or if he's using the LFE inputs, because they have them. They have RCA plugs.
Right.
So I don't know what connection method he's using, but at the moment, they are acting as his subwoofers. So he was thinking, hey, I could get 2 more of these, and I'd have 4 subwoofers, none of them optimally placed, but I'd have 4 of them.
That's the big problem. Yeah, that's a big problem, is that unless you're going to optimally place your 4 speakers so that they're good subwoofers, they will then be bad speakers.
Right.
It's like, so you put your front left and right speakers in your front left and right corners, and your surround speakers in your rear right and left corners, and they are now correctly placed for subs, but terribly placed to give you surround sound or a stereo image. So
and regardless, the base extension and output capabilities of the 8-inch drivers built into the BP 9040 towers is not equal to what a pair of SP-2000 Pro subs can do. So I mean, probably one of the easier answers as far as what AVRant typical advice goes here. We would most definitely have you get the pair of SVS subwoofers. SP-2000 Pros for a 14 by 20 foot room. Yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable. We got no beef with that.
That'll be good. That'll be good. So he asked, should he go with the DefTech bipole surround speakers? That would have been the advice about 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. Bipole would have been a very good option. It gives you a more diffuse sound. So it disperses the sound around the room a little bit. It's a little bit wider. They're usually a trapezoidal shape.
And these ones are. They're that typical trapezoid shape that hangs flash on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are nice, and those would be fine.
They would be fine.
But if you're going to go for an Atmos, or you're thinking, that someday upgrading and adding more speakers to the setup, the recommendations for now is a direct firing speaker, and that's because we're now trying to place objects within a 3-dimensional space. And direct firing bookshelf type or satellite type speakers are more pinpoint, so that we can, that we know exactly, or when the mix is done, they know exactly, how this thing is going to sound without having to deal with the fact that it's now, got a diffuse sound back there, which is less pinpointy. So now we would just recommend going with a satellite or a bookshelf speaker of the same, with the same brand or same size as those bipole speakers.
And now with the next question that he's got coming up, part of this is price concern. So with the bipole surrounds costing a bit more than just getting the smallest bookshelf model that matches the series of speaker that you have, I would save the money. I'd get the monopole bookshelf and use that as your surround for sure.
Yeah. So depending on how much he spends on new speakers and subwoofers, he's looking to get either get the Optima Cinema X P2 or the Vava 4K ultra short throw projector. Any opinions on that?
Yes, I have.
I'm sure he does. I do not. But yes, you should save the money. You should get the SVS subs. You should get the monopole, the small bookshelf surrounds, put them on the wall or whatever, and then which projector?
You should get the Optima. It is not really a contest. I know people are excited about the Vava because it's a very attractive price point, and people are like, oh, hey, look at this ultra short throw thing. It's amazing. Say the people who've never looked at any other projector before. Honestly, the thing I dislike about the Vava the most is it's noisy. It is a noisy projector. The Optima is not silent, but it is far more tolerable.
Is that also an ultra short throw? It is
also an ultra short throw. Okay. But I mean, it's an ultra short throw as good as an ultra short throw gets at its type of price point, which is pretty darn reasonable, but it is more than the Vava. But like the Cinema XP2 it's so much better. Please, whatever you have to do, get that one instead. It's not really a contest. There.
Okay. I need to see what time it is.
Yeah, we should have at least a half hour.
We've got some time. Yeah, we've got some time. Nick. In Nick's theater room, he's going to have a 77-inch C9 OLED and then a tab tension screen that rolls down in front of the OLED for his projection setup. He does play video games, including retro games, and he'll often play for several hours straight. He doesn't like to be in total pitch blackness when playing, and he doesn't think he'd actually like the massive field of view that he's planning for the projector. Playing on the OLED was the idea, but this is funny. I literally wrote an article about this today. I haven't published it yet, but I wrote an article about this today, so make sure you link it up. Is burn-in really not a concern? Like, he can't imagine retro games on the OLED would be a good idea, right? He'd be fine limiting himself only to PS4 and PS5 generation games in the theater, but some of those still have static HUDs. So what about using his projector instead? If he gives it a try, but the field of view is too big and the need for pitch blackness is a no-go, would it make sense to buy a second roll-down projection screen, a smaller ambient light rejecting screen, just for gaming? What do we think? So as it's funny because I still feel like burn-in for the most part is still LED's best and only weapon against every other type of
LCDs,
direct view, or LCDs, best and only weapon against every other type of display technology that's out there. Like, they will continue hammering this home and making sure people believe it. It killed plasmas, as far as I'm concerned. That and the prices of plasmas couldn't come down as fast as the LCD prices did. But yeah, so is burn-in a thing? Yes. OLEDs can burn in. It is possible. There is no doubt about it. You can do it. I mean, Ertings did their big year-long or whatever it was test where they played some ridiculous thing for like 13 hours a day.
It was like 5 hours. 22 hours out of the day. It was
yeah. Yeah, it was like 13 hours of one image and they changed it to a different, I don't know. It was very strange. I didn't really read the whole thing, but the reality is yes, you can make an OLED burn in. You can do it. But how do you stop OLEDs from burning in? Yes, if you play nothing but the same game for 20 or Twitch streamer and you're playing it for, a 48-hour stream, yeah, you could be looking at having a life bar that's permanently up there, or something like that. Number one thing, check, set your screen into what the proper mode, which would be, Cine mode or ISF mode or whatever. Game mode,
but just turn the OLED light setting down. Get it below 40, which it is not at by default, but get it below 40.
Right. So what causes burn-in, other than just having the same image up there for years and years or hours and hours, day after day after day, is your light source is too high and your contrast is too high. If you stop those things, if you adjust those things so they're the proper level, you reduce the chance of burn-in significantly. The OLEDs also have the, what is it called? The pixel shift?
Yeah, there's the pixel orbiter that subtly moves the image around.
Yeah. And then they also have, like, when you turn it off, you can set it to go through like this refresh cycle to reset.
All that really does, though, is so you can prematurely age the entire OLED panel to try and prevent anything that was aging ahead of others from being noticeable.
Right. So, I mean, as far as LG is concerned, or if you contact them, they'll say, "Oh yeah, it's perfectly fine. You can do it as much as you want." But the idea, the idea that it's basically trying to even out the usage of all the different color pixels, or
subpixels,
whatever they are in there, subpixels that are in there. And then, of course, if you're really worried about it, then you can go to YouTube and get one of those stuck pixel
That doesn't
things.
really do much on this front.
It just flashes a bunch of images up there for 12 straight hours.
So, I mean, I have to agree with Nick that I wouldn't want to play like a particular retro game for hours and hours and hours. Because like you're going to have pillar boxes, and it might become possible to see the pillar box, like the little shadow of the pillar, where it's actually like the pillar box didn't age as much as the rest of the screen. But if you always have pillar boxes for like hours and hours and hours, that can be noticeable. The older games definitely had like the static image. The life bar was just always there. The HUDs are just always there. Now, like part of that Rtings test that they did, like they played Call of Duty for 22 hours a day, you know, or just had a video of Call of Duty being played on a loop. It had its HUD up there, but with modern games, if they don't give you the option, like most of them, the HUD is a little bit translucent. They don't just have like the fully bright static HUDs like the older games did. And that was enough. Like on the Call of Duty, the poor OLED that was playing Call of Duty for 22 hours a day for a year didn't have any burn-in, which is nuts. Like everyone expected it to, and it didn't. The one that was playing FIFA for 22 hours a day for a year had like a little bit where the scoreboard was all the time. So is it possible? Yes, it's possible. If you take any care whatsoever to vary up your content somewhat, it's like, but I agree with the retro games. The retro game thing makes me go, ugh, I wouldn't want to play those for hours and hours and hours with the pillar boxes up there.
Who does that though? I guess if he's a speedrunner, if he's trying to be a speedrunner on Mario or something, and is practicing the same screens over and over again, so that could be it. But if you're a casual gamer, and by casual I just mean, you know, you're going to play Mario for 20, 30 minutes, an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then you're going to switch to a different game, I wouldn't worry about it. I just don't think it's going to be an issue, especially if you're going to vary that up with some of the, you know, the newer games that are out there that can take advantage of the full screen. If you want to try it on your projector, you can. I play on my projector; it's not an issue. But Clint had a wider field of view than I did, and he had to take like motion sickness pills whenever we would play first-person shooters because he would get sick to his stomach. So I mean, that's cheaper than buying a second ambient light rejecting screen to drop down in front of it if you're really worried about it.
Definitely lower the OLED light while you're playing games. That's a big thing. And your eyes will adjust if you're like, oh, it's not glaringly bright. You know, like just give your eye a second. It'll adapt. So definitely lower the OLED light setting. Doing that, with what you described as your gaming taste, I think you would be perfectly fine using the OLED in that case. Yeah. I would not do both. I would not have an OLED and two projection screens, one of which is a smaller ambient light rejecting. I could make the argument for not having the OLED at all and having two projection screens. One that you use with a little bit of ambient light that's smaller, and one that is larger and white and, you know, room perfectly blacked out. I can make the argument for two screens, but not three. So, there you go.
Right. It really feels like you have to really, really abuse. And abuse, I think, comes in the form of not changing the backlight and the picture mode.
Which I can't blame people for, because, I mean, that's the out-of-the-box setting. You put it in game mode, and I don't expect everybody to manually lower the OLED light setting. That's not really on the user, in my opinion. But follow the advice, and you're that much safer.
Mark is an engineering grad student at North Carolina State University. It isn't his department, but he was informed of a new R&D tool that just released by NCSU called Artificial Chemist 2.0. It uses artificial intelligence and the latest quantum dot materials and chemistry to rapidly experiment and then prototype to find the best quantum dot formulation and manufacturing steps. The process is autonomous, with the experiment and learning stage taking 1 to 10 hours, and then the prototype manufacturing taking less than an hour. The more is used, the faster the learning stage will become as it builds upon past experience. Do we foresee this having an impact on the AV realm? Well, yeah, when it starts creating its own Disney Plus programs and we no longer have to have actual actors do anything because it just 3D rendered them, you know, because that's what we wanted. Yeah, artificial intelligence is going to invade every single facet of our lives over the next, 10 to 20 years. It's it's everywhere. It's where we don't think it is. That's why when I'm writing an article about something and I do one search and then I go back to Facebook, the ad that I was looking at is no longer there. It's now a new ad based on what I just searched. I mean, these are all algorithms, and algorithms are nothing but simple AI. So we're going to see more and more of this. So yes, I feel like we're going to see stuff like this as far as, especially when it comes to manufacturing smaller and smaller displays that have higher and higher resolution, because we're going to need those for things like your VR headsets, your smart glasses, which eventually will come back. I heard there was so you have like your Fitbits, but there's a ring that does this as well. That you have like smart rings or something.
Yeah, like
these
back
days?
in
I didn't even know that was a
2019,
thing.
Amazon announced a smart ring that never came out. So I don't know what happened to that one.
Right. But they're saying now that they didn't even know that Fitbit can predict when you have COVID before you have it, because it measures your body temperature, and the fluctuations can give you an indication that you have COVID before you actually feel the symptoms. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. That's AI right there. So yeah, I see it happening.
I mean, from my reading, I mean, this wasn't like an academic paper that he linked us to. It was sort of just a press release that type, because it wasn't technical language. But from what was being described, like with display, when we're talking televisions or projectors or something like that, the targets for what colors they want the quantum dots to produce are very well known, right? We have the coordinates for the targets, whether we're targeting DCI-P3 color or targeting Rec 2020 color or targeting Rec 709 color. Like, those are fixed targets that are already known. So I don't necessarily see rapid prototyping being super useful there, because where this is most effective is in figuring out the perfect formulation for a new wavelength of light. You want a specific wavelength of light for a quantum dot to produce, and this can rapidly find the correct formulation to give you that exact wavelength. But in the case of displays, we already know the wavelengths we want, so I'm not sure that it's super useful for that particular purpose. Now, where this could be super useful, and it didn't sound like the current machine that they have would be doing this, but an iteration on this machine could be super useful, is in getting us to having full quantum dot displays where we're no longer using a blue light source. We're currently using a blue LED or a blue laser, and then using quantum dots to make just the green and the red, but to actually make a fully quantum dot display where even the blue is made by a quantum dot by exciting them all with just an electron beam. If an iteration of this Artificial Chemist and Artificial Chemist 3.0 can start using electron beams as the stimulus instead of blue light, this could be very useful for finding out, okay, how do we actually get the shades of blue and violet that have been impossible until now? It could actually open up an additional part of the color spectrum that displays haven't been able to do so far. So potentially very useful indeed.
All right. Gurinder liked our idea of building false columns on his side walls to house some Polk LSI in-wall speakers as his surrounds, rather than trying to find on-walls from a different brand to match his Polk LSI front speakers. But essentially building his surround speakers into his side walls means he needs to get the positioning just right the first time. I don't think that's necessarily true, but let's go on. With his room being narrow for his new front seats, if someone is sitting in one of the side seats, their ear is only 2 feet from the side wall. So does it make sense to have the surround speakers exactly 90 degrees to the sides of that front row? Would it be better to have them a little in front or a little behind? He does have a second row of seats currently on a temporary riser that he made out of the pallets that were used to ship the new front row seats. That's recycling. That is a riser.
That's reusing.
That's recycling. Bob the Builder, we're proud of you. That would require making the false columns a little bit deeper and have to carefully plan the angle. Behind would be better than in front, in my opinion. And I don't see why your columns couldn't be almost compression fit. I mean, you could actually make them a little bit shorter, or so that they fit with in the wall.
See. Not actually built in, like they stand on the floor and wedge into the ceiling.
Right, but you make them a little bit shorter than that, and then you take and you basically shim them when you get them to the spot you want. And then so you put a little row of trim around the bottom and the top. or maybe just the top, and then top and sides. And then when you put them against the wall, the trim just sits flush to the wall. And then underneath, you make shims that have the trim attached to the shim, so that when you slide it in, it presses it into the ceiling, and the trim looks like it's built into the wall, when really it's just the shim, and you pull that out afterwards. I am not a builder, so I can come up with the great ideas that builder type people are going to be like, yeah, that's way too complicated. I'm not doing that. I mean, but you see what I'm saying.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
even if you
Then
just
you could
shimmed it up, then and they were off the ground a little bit, no one's going to look. No one's going to care. I mean, or you shimmed them at the top, no one would care either, as long as the shim was invisible.
I was going to suggest that, I mean, he does have other speakers on hand.
Right.
So even before you buy the Polk LSI in-walls, I was like, let's just do some experiments. I mean, it won't be exactly the same as in-Wallsian false columns, but in terms of finding the right placement, and whether you do want to angle them in towards the main seat or not, I would just take some bookshelf speakers, the smallest, thinnest ones that you have, and just experiment with them. Like, my own personal taste is I rarely like having my surround speakers directly 90 degrees to my sides, like regardless of the setup. I very rarely prefer that. I almost always like to have them at about the 100 degree mark, just slightly behind my seat.
Yeah.
I never point them straight at me. I'll put them at like the 100 degree mark and then have them fire straight across the room at each other.
Yeah, me too.
So that I'm always a little bit off axis. That sounds right to my ears for surround speakers, but you're under no obligation to feel the same way. So I would experiment with this with some speakers that you already have on hand. It won't be identical to the columns. If you're super worried about it, then yes, do Tom's idea as well. But I think experimenting before you've built the columns and before you even have the in-wall speakers, you can get a pretty good idea of what you think sounds right. But neither of us would have the surround slightly in front of us. It would, if it's going to be anything, it'll be slightly behind us.
Yeah, I'm very much of the opinion that, we all think we're going to die in the house that we're currently living in, and the reality is that that's not going to be the case. So anytime we make a change to a house, it should be with the thought that later on this makes it easier to sell and not harder. So permanent risers attached to the ground, I'm against. Like, oh, well, if you put one on top and then you weight it down and everything, like you guys say, you're going to crush the carpet and you're going to ruin the carpet. Carpet's cheap. Ripping a riser out is
more
is
involved.
Not. Yeah. So to me, if you're going to build columns in here and you can make it so they're easily removable, not only can you take them with you, but it makes it so that later on down the line, a little bit extra work now means a lot less cost later. But that's just me. All right, Chris. Chris feels very fortunate that the new house he bought 9 years ago included a large rectangular room with no support poles in the basement. That allowed him to build a 16-foot by 23-foot by 8.5-foot dedicated home theater. His first row seats are 13 feet from the screen. Then he has a riser that goes all the way to the back wall with a second row of seats and a third row of bar stools at the back. His speakers are all golden ear with Triton 1 towers. Those are the ones with the woofers in them, right?
Yes, many of them.
Super Center, 4 in-walls for surround and surround backs, and 4 in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. He's using a new Marantz AV7706 Pre-Pro. For subwoofer duties, he started with the self-powered subwoofer drivers built into his Triton 1 towers. Then he added an SVS SP-3000. It can be considered a 7.3.4 setup because he's using the LFE inputs on the towers to send them the LFE base managed subwoofer output from his AV7706 rather than just setting the front, left, and right speakers to full range. You can consider it that, but it's not. Let's go on. The SP-3000, you can consider it a duck. It's not going to make it a duck. The SP-3000 ended up at the halfway mark on his right side wall. Adding that to the subwoofers in his towers really filled his room with bass, but maybe sounds a bit too heavy. He tried configuring things with only the SP-3000, tower set to small, no subwoofer output being sent to them, but that only sounded okay. So what is the best way to handle all of this? He can't change the positions of his towers, which is reasonable. He loves the current stereo imaging and performance for music, so does that mean he should do a subwoofer crawl for just the SP-3000? Should the towers be run as full range but without the RCA subwoofer signals going to them, or continue running things as a 0.3 setup, but 2 of those subs are stuck in the front, left, and right positions? Yeah. So
none
here we
of
are.
the above.
Yeah, here we are. You need a second sub, and you need to do what we always say anyways.
This is, I mean, of the very understandable problem
Yes.
with the DefTech and the Golden Ear and any other
Yes.
speakers that have you plug them into the wall. They have self-powered, built-in powered, quote-unquote subwoofer drivers, and it feels like a waste to not use them as subwoofers. I completely understand that feeling. It's one of the reasons why we're not fans of that design. But yeah, well, I mean, I'll just say it now so that it's out of the way. When you set your towers to small and you give them an 80 hertz crossover, you are not wasting the capabilities of those built-in self-powered drivers. They are still being utilized. They play all the way up to at least 350 hertz, and then they roll off above that. It is not as though you are not using those self-powered drivers or you're putting them to waste at all, but
They can call them subwoofers all they want, but they're still playing like
bass drivers
a good
with,
portion of the bass that you're hearing.
that have amplification built in, which is not a bad thing. It means that the amount of power that is coming from your receivers amplifiers, or in your case, you have separate amplifiers because you have a pre-pro, but the power that is coming from those is less. The bass is being handled by the built-in power of your towers, but we are not going to have you set them to full range. We're going to have you set them to small, and we are not going to consider them subwoofers. They're just going to be small speakers that happen to have part of their power being supplied by a wall outlet directly to the tower.
Okay. They're big speakers that we are asking to play the majority of the frequency response, majority of your hearing range, but they are not. So they're large speakers, but we have to call them small for bass management purposes. Then you are going to cross over them at 80 hertz or maybe 60 if you're feeling whatever. But I would cross them over at 80 into the subwoofer, and then you've got one subwoofer. You have a 0.1 system. You've always had a point. Yeah. Well, and when you got that SB3000, you have a 0.1 system. Before that, you had a 0.0 system because those Triton towers were never able to play down to 20 hertz.
But Tom, they claim the frequency response claims to go down to, I think, 9. I think that's what Golden Ear put on their spec sheet.
Hey, the speakers in my car go down to 9. You just can't hear them when they do it, but they do. They go down to 9. So any driver can be oscillated at 9 beats a second, which is what that is. So it matters whether or not you can actually experience. So yeah. So the subwoofer crawl part of this. So what are you going to do now? There's you're in a rectangular room. You've got a bunch of different areas that you could put this thing in. It is a dedicated theater. We're going to tell you to get a second subwoofer, and
that would be the ideal.
Yeah, that would be the ideal. But for right now, you could do the subwoofer crawl to try to figure out where to put this thing, and that would be a perfully reasonable thing to do.
If the budget isn't on hand right now to purchase a second SB3000, which is a totally reasonable thing to say, then we would have you do a subwoofer crawl for just the SB3000, but that would be your only subwoofer at that point. You are not going to run an RCA cable to your Triton towers anymore. You are not going to label them as full range. You're going to label them as small, and your SB3000 will be your only sub. If it is your only sub for the time being, by all means do a subwoofer crawl. If you can afford to get a second one, though, you already found that the midpoint of your right-hand wall for this one, the midpoint of your left-hand wall, because it sounds like this is a very symmetrical room, that would be the ideal place to put the second subwoofer.
Right.
Then you only need to do the first 4 steps of my 12-step guide. You don't even have to mess with anything else. It'll be easy.
Hopefully you can do that, because I would be leery of putting a SB3000 on top of a riser, which at the back of his room it says the riser goes all the way to the back wall.
Yeah, but
so if that riser is
23 feet long, and his first row of seats is 13 feet in. So he's in front of the riser as far as where the subwoofer is.
Right. So it seems like it should be fine. I mean, we don't know what this room looks like. So if you were like, well, I'd rather put it, front left corner, back right corner, I would be concerned about putting it on top of that riser. I would definitely get the isolation feet.
Well, get the isolation feet either way. We should have those.
Yeah. But, I would be worried about it shaking that riser quite a bit. Even with the isolation feet, I would still be concerned about it. So, whatever. Chris has a JVC X500 projector. It has been great, but being over 5 years old now, it doesn't accept HDR signals. And while it can technically accept 4K resolution, it uses E-Shift to wobble its 1080p panel, and it does not have HDCP 2.2. So in effect, it is an excellent 1080p projector. So now is the time to is now the time to upgrade to either the NX5 or NX7. The HBO Max announcement of Wonder Woman 84 and all of their 2021 movies coming day and date with 4K HDR is kind of pushing him over the edge. If he goes for it, is the NX7 worth the price over the NX5? I'm going to let Rob answer this
Alrighty.
one because I don't know the answer.
Okay, so here's how I'm going to put it to you. Can you envision any world in which you're willing to wait? Because we do anticipate that JVC will have a product refresh at the end of 2021. We don't know that for sure. That's just based on previous life cycles. But this will be coming up to the end of 3 years of the NX5, NX7, NX9 lineage. And 3 years is usually about as long as projector models go before there's a refresh of the lineup. So given that, if there is any way that you can wait until about November of 2021, I think it might be worth your while because you already have a very good-looking projector. It doesn't do HDR, I grant you that, but it's not as though you've been comparing it to HDR and even really miss it at the moment. You have a really, really good-looking projector right now, and the new ones coming out, by all expectations, should be an improvement on the existing NX5 and NX7. So that's the one way to look at it. Now, if you just take all that and you go, that's not the answer I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear a buyer projector right now. You know what? That's fine, because if you get an NX5 or an NX7, it's not like you're going to be disappointed. They are fantastic projectors. Is the NX7 worth the money over the NX5? A little bit tough. You actually have the kind of environment where you might be able to see the advantage of the NX7, which is that its black levels are even a little bit better. Its contrast is even a little bit better. But there's one sort of key thing going on here, which is that the NX7 has a physical color filter that can be put into the path of the light to give you the full DCI P3 color. But of course, when you do that, it cuts the light output significantly. It's like a 35-40% reduction in light output, whereas the NX5 does not have that physical color filter. And yet, even without the color filter in place, it still gets about like 92-93% of DCI P3, just not the 99 to 100% that the NX7 does. But as a result, it's brighter all the time in HDR. Man, my personal opinion is that people should not sleep on the NX5. I think people are enticed by that NX7. It's the color filter. It's 100% DCI P3. It claims even better black levels. I'm like, but you don't get the brightness, and the brightness is the thing it matters a bit more when you already have like 92, 93%. However, most people don't have like a fully blacked out, completely enclosed, dedicated theater, and it makes the black level and contrast advantage nigh impossible to see with the NX7. I don't know if your theater is actually completely blacked out. We know it's dedicated, but okay, there you go. If your room is not a bat cave, then get the NX5. Save the money, get the NX5. It'll be brighter. The color you're not going to worry about, and you're not going to notice unless you have a bat cave. If you have an absolute bat cave, okay, get the NX7. There you go.
I got a bat cave. Saying. All right, he's thinking about switching to a 2.35 to 1 screen. Hear him out, he says, because I was already saying no.
That's right. He knows.
So his current field of view, his current screen is 16 by 9 and 123 inches. From 13 feet away in the front row, that's 37.9 degree field of view. The issue is that he cannot make the screen any taller, but he could make it wider while keeping the same 60-inch height. If he did that, he could create a 48.8 degree field of view for CinemaScope content. The image would be 140 inches wide, or the equivalent width of 160-inch 16 by 9 screen. His JVC would remain with a 20-foot throw distance. So what do we think? Since he can't make the screen taller, is it worth making it wider? And if he does, which brand of screen would you recommend? So what he's saying here is that he would zoom in for 16 by 9 content so that he would have black bars on the side, and his image should be similarly sized to what he's currently watching. And then with CinemaScope, it would go back out, and then he would get the full, almost 50-degree field of view on that. First of all, I don't think I want a 50-degree field of view. I don't think I would find that enjoyable.
Well, and to me, the more concerning thing is the equivalent size of a 160-inch 16 by 9 screen, that's going to be a challenge for any of the JVC projectors.
Well, it's going to be a challenge for any consumer level
Yes,
projector, just
yeah.
about. I mean, you're asking it to do something. I mean, we normally max out at 135.
135 is where HDR still looks different from SDR.
Yeah.
150 is doable, but at that point, HDR isn't going to look any different than SDR because you've just maxed out the light output of the projector in SDR mode as it is on a 150-inch screen. Yeah, I mean, I understand the challenge of, hey, I maxed out the height of my screen and I wouldn't mind my field of view being even bigger. So, the only logical thing to do is to keep the same height and have a greater width. But it brings problems if you were to do this and go for, say, the 2.35 to 1 screen that has the same width as, well, let's say a 135-inch. Now, when
Same
you watch...
the height as a 135 inch.
Well, the same width.
16 by 9.
Yeah, the same width, because he's saying, like, if he expands the width, it would be the same as a 160 inch. The same width, but then because it's 2.35 instead of 16 by 9, it's shorter than a 160 inch 16 by 9. So if, like, let's just imagine you throw a 135 inch image, right? That would be too tall presently. A 135 would be too tall. He only has the height for a 123. So we're talking about the same width as a 135. Now your height is smaller than what you have right now.
Right.
So then when you go to watch 16 by 9 content, your image is down, you're going to be up 110, something like there. It's 110, 112.
Yeah.
So you've actually shrunk.
That's not what he's asking, though. He's saying that he's going to keep the same height.
Same height, yeah.
I know, but 60 inches, but then it's going to be even wider than before. So his 16 by 9 would stay the same size.
Yeah, that's his idea, but I'm saying that then when he tries to actually fill the entire width, he's kept the same height as his 123, but just made it wider.
Yeah.
Like, now you're asking the projector to fill the equivalent of a 160-inch screen, which it's not really equipped to do. So this, to me, is it's problem. I mean, what do? We got to keep the height of 60 but make it slightly wider, and then nothing fully fills the screen? You either have some black bars at top and bottom or some pillar box bars. Like, I don't know.
So let me describe to you, what would happen, I think, in this situation. So you have so you keep the same projector you currently have.
Yeah.
Let's just pretend that.
And by the way, the throw distance is fine. The JVCs have a huge zoom range, and when they've got a 20-foot throw, all of these sizes are possible in terms of just being able to fill the screen. So that part isn't a concern.
So say that you upgrade your projector to one of the JVCs. So now you've got, you're in your back cave. You've got HDR. You've got the full color gamut, you've got everything, or most 92% of the color gamut or whatever, right? So you've got on your 16 by 9 image, which is still the same size as it was before, but now has huge black bars on the right and the left. It's going to be this bright HDR, pseudo 4K or 4K, I can't remember if that projector does, image that's going to be beautiful. Right. Then you're gonna turn on one of your movies, and it's going to be CinemaScope. So you're going to zoom out so that it fills that entire 2.35 to 1 screen, and you're going to lose your HDR. Everything's going to get dim.
The visibility of the HDR. Yeah.
Everything's going to get dimmer overall, and it's just it'll be wider, but it will be darker, and there'll be no real way to recover that because the projector is not built. And
I know somebody out there is going to be screaming anamorphic lens,
oh,
but
right.
Let's put that to rest, because when you use the anamorphic lens, it means that the zoom on the projector doesn't change. So it's the same. It's the zoom is the same on the projector. The anamorphic lens moves into place. Now, he would be wanting to use a anamorphic wide stretch. You certainly wouldn't want to use an anamorphic vertical compress, because that would make it even worse. But you'd use an anamorphic wide stretch. But the zoom is still where it is, and now the same amount of light that used to be filling the 16 by 9 screen, you're trying to use the exact same amount of light to fill this wider screen. So it gets a little bit dimmer. Now, if you don't use the anamorphic lens, but instead you just zoom in to fill the entire width, because that's what you would be doing, the zoom adds some light as you zoom in. As you get closer to the wide angle side of the zoom range, it adds some light. Now, you are still asking it to fill a bigger screen, so you lose light because of that, but you gain some light from zooming in. The end result in terms of lumens coming off the screen, whether you just use the zoom version or you use the anamorphic lens version, it ends up about the same. It ends up almost exactly the same. So this argument that anamorphic lenses put more light on the screen because you're using the entire panel instead of some of the panels being part of the panel being used by black bars. No, they're not taking into account the zoom. The zoom changes the amount of light that comes out of the projector, and it ends up being a wash. So that isn't the solution there. Okay, back to what Tom was going to say there. I went on a slight tangent there.
I don't remember. That was a long time ago.
we're okay. So what do we actually?
The reality
is,
it just doesn't. What do we want them to do? There's not. I don't
keep,
think. I
keep
think
his current screen.
You've got. I mean, if you can't go any taller,
right?
Then yeah, you gotta keep your current screen. I don't see any way that you can get around it. I mean, unless you can figure out some way to go 135-inch diagonal. Because right now he's at what, 123?
He's at 123. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can't figure out a way to go 135-inch diagonal, which would be sort of the max of where we would want you to.
Yeah, I mean
to be.
The theory is there that you could go as big as 150, but you're not really getting the performance in the HDR that you'd be getting the NX5 or the NX7 for. So 135 is where we're like, yeah, everything is gravy, everything is good.
I mean, unless you're willing to spend the price of a car on the projector and the room that you'll have to put it in, along with the special,
cooling
HVAC coolant, hood thing that they put over the top of those projectors. I just don't see it as being.
Man,
I honestly, if the problem is you would like a wider field of view for your cinemascope, add a couple of more seats in front of you and go sit closer whenever you are. You know what I mean? But
move
that
your
changes
current first row a foot or two closer. I mean, so let's say, regardless of what we say, he's going to wind up getting a 2.35 to 1 inch screen anyway, because I kind of think that's in the back of his mind. I would have you get it from Seymour AV. Okay. Because that is the best way to at least get, at the very least, manual masking panels, because some of your content is not going to be 2.35 to 1. Some of your content is still going to be 16 by 9. And whether you do that anamorphic lens style or zoom style, you're going to end up with blank on the left and right of your screen. Not black bars from the projector, just blank where nothing is being projected. I would definitely want to have masking panels. So if you can afford the motorized masking from Seymour AV, wonderful, but that's like close to $10,000.
Right.
But the manual masking panel is really quite affordable. So that would be one way to do it. You do conceivably have the option, because Seymour AV offers this, is the constant area screen, which is what I mentioned. It is neither 16 by 9 nor 2.35 to 1. It's like it's almost like a 2.0 to 1 type of screen.
Oh, right.
And so
right.
And with that, they actually give you 4-way manual masking. So you have skinnier masks on the sides when it's 16 by 9 time versus what the side masks on a 2.35 would be. And then when it's 16 by 9, when it's 2.35 to 1 time, you have skinnier top and bottom masks than if you put masks on a 16 by 9 screen, right? So you have 4-way masking, you mask it down, whether it's 16 by 9 or 2.35 to 1, you have masks, but you have 4 masks with a constant area screen.
Yeah, I wrote about that too. There's the 2.0 to 1 or 2 to 1 ratio is something that a couple of directors and cinematographers, are trying to push as being a good, because why do we have
16 by 9 was the compromise to begin with.
I know. So 16 by 9, what they're saying, obviously 4 to 3, which is what we initially had, it's vertically very, very tall. So it's quote unquote better for, character driven pieces where you're looking at the people, because you see more of the people. You see the height of the person. Whereas 2.35 to 1 is the CinemaScope, or sometimes it's 2.4 to 1. Yeah. That gives you more of the background. So those sweeping vistas that you want to look at. So a 2 to 1 is said to be the compromise between 16 by 9, which they are now saying is more character driven, and 2.4 to 1, which is the more CinemaScope and the more cinematic version. So they're saying 2 to 1 is going to be the new whatever. I'm like, they're never selling this. like a million years. There's just too much 16:9 out there. All the video games are built for 16:9. All the TV shows now are filmed in 16:9.
Yes.
Oh, not all of them, but most of them are filmed primarily in 16:9.
I mean, the bottom line is people never want black bars, but we're never going to get away from black bars because we have a ton of existing content with various aspect ratios.
Right.
You're never going to have a scenario with no black. Yeah, I mean, 16:9 was actually never supposed to be fully filled. They thought TV was going to stay 4:3, and they thought movies were going to stay 2.35:1, and therefore, if you show both of those on a 16:9 screen, with the 16:9 screen never being fully filled, it either had pillar box bars on the left and right, or it had letterbox bars on the top and bottom, but the area of the 4:3 would be about equal to the area of the 2.35:1 on a 16:9 screen. But people saw that and they go, well, to fill the whole screen, use 16:9. So now we end up with most of our content being a mix between 16:9 and 2.35:1. And we're like, well, let's use a constant area screen that's like 2.0:1.
Yeah,
if we did that, people would be
it's
like,
never going to sell.
People would be like, fill the 2.0 screen. But anyway, that would be the solution. That way you could keep your existing 60-inch height while making the screen a little bit wider. But
not so wide that it kills the projector's ability to display.
But not so wide that it would...
I like that.
Yeah, but then...
I like that. I had forgotten that Seymour AV did that.
Yeah, but if you do that, you'll need to be aware that your 16:9 images... let's see, they'll actually end up being exactly the same as they are because the height remained the same, but you'll just have some pillar box masking for when it's 16:9 time. And when it's 2.35:1 time, it won't fill the entire height of the constant area screen. You'll have letterbox masking on the top and bottom, but it will be wider than your current screen.
So you'll have to have some lens memory for this to work properly.
But the JVCs do. His current JVC already does. So that might be the compromise there, is the constant area screen.
I like that. All right, who we have left?
We have Joe K, and we have Brendan following up with some notes from Australia. There we go. And did have a couple questions come in Monday, Tuesday. They will be on the list for Christmas week.
All right. So if you want your question answered on the podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. I also want to remind people that if you've got nice pictures of your gear, speakers, projectors, home theater, acoustic panels, I don't care, please send them along to me at tom@avrant.com with a note that tells me that it's okay to use those pictures at will for all eternity.
If you're including
in
them
my
as
articles,
part of an AVRant question, you can put it in there too. I'll forward it on to Tom with your note giving him permission to use them in perpetuity.
Right. All right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Brian, Chris, and Brendan for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation, as well as our 126 patrons over at patreon.com.
Indeed. Brian, Chris, and Brendan, thank you very much for the PayPal donations. Really appreciate that. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Anybody who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, thanks very much to our 126 patrons over there.
And I want to thank Jack, Nick, Chris, and Joe for sending us notes of gratitude for keeping this podcast going during a pandemic.
Indeed. Jack, Nick, Chris, and Joe, thank you very much. Really do appreciate the notes of gratitude and encouragement that we do receive. It is very nice. That has been a little bit of a bright spot in this year of 2020 that we're thankfully coming to a close, but we still got a ways to go with this. Gotta keep vigilant here. Vaccines are here. They have arrived. We just gotta.
I saw pictures of them getting delivered to Tampa General.
There you go.
Which is where they are in my area right now. So
if we keep our heads about us, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Let's just not flood the tunnel before we get to that light, shall we? So let's stay positive. Again, patient.
I live in Florida. Believe me, there's lots of positive people here. Yes. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com.
This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.